Thanks for taking time to listen to this episode of the Real Rescue Podcast. Take a minute to go to therealrescue.com to check out these and other great deals from our sponsors here at The Real Rescue. This episode of the Real Rescue Podcast is brought to you by Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. And RescueSwimmerShop.com, official high-quality apparel featuring the Silhouette. Breeze Eastern, they dedicate themselves to our helicopter rescue world. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November of 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and the unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those being rescued has not. Contact them today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. SR3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help your helicopter training. They train daytime, nighttime, aerial firefighting, hoist, longline, fast rope, rappel, and more. They can assist your program with standardization and safety checks or just an FAA annual refresher. With the certified flight instructor pilots and experienced crew, they are ready to help your agency keep up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. Plus, right now, SR3 is offering 10% off anything in their web store with the promo code, all capital letters, REALRESCUE, REALRESQ. Plus, they are offering 10% from their partners Petzl and their equipment. All you got to do is send an email to info@sr3rescueconcepts.com. Mention this podcast, the Real Rescue Podcast, and they'll take care of the rest. 15 years ago, photographer and Coast Guard rescue swimmer number 526, Chris Razak, created an iconic photograph. This photograph depicted the silhouette of a helicopter rescue swimmer reaching down for an outstretched hand in need against the American flag backdrop. The image went viral and became a symbol worldwide for the rescue community and the people they help. Its wild popularity inspired Chris to launch RescueSwimmerShop.com, a web store offering official high-quality apparel featuring his evocative image, the Silhouette. T-shirts, hats, patches, and stickers featuring the Silhouette are available at RescueSwimmerShop.com, including the flagship design, So Others May Live. Follow Chris and his story on Instagram with the handle @RescueSwimmerShop. And if you are a rescue swimmer, support rescue swimmers, or just tell people you are one at the bar, this gear is definitely for you. When you get to the website, RescueSwimmerShop.com, enter the promo code, all lowercase, one word, RESCUE, RESCUE, for 10% off your order. Our next guest that joins us has done 41 years of EMS, fire, and rescue. He's a retired EMS battalion captain out of the fire department. The stories that he brought to us are like mind-blowing, and I loved every minute of it. The fact of the matter is, in all these stories that he was sharing, this is literally the tip of the iceberg. There were so many more that we actually talked about that I couldn't put in because this episode is already long. But I couldn't help it because I was so engrossed with every story that he had. It was amazing. So please welcome our next guest, Mr. Mark Siegel. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real Rescue Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real Rescue Podcast. I've got a wicked treat for everybody today. So this guy has come to us His name is Mr. Mark Siegel, retired EMS battalion captain. Mr. Mark, how are you today?
Doing well, thank you. How's everything?
Everything is fantastic. Now, the cool part about this is you and I actually got connected through your son, because Jason and I are extremely good friends, and he actually sent me a message. He's like, dude, you got to hear some of the stories that my dad has, and that's how you and I connected. So I'm excited.
Hey, no worries here. I got lots of stories about Jason. Some of those he may not want me to tell.
We should probably keep those to a PG too.
Yeah.
Because if we start letting those out of the bag, he's going to call me and be like, dude, that's not how this is supposed to go.
I got it. I hear you.
Oh, but Mr. Mark, if you don't mind, just kind of introduce yourself, give a little background about who you are, how you got into EMS and fire.
All right. Well, it's kind of a long story, and I don't know if there's a Reader's Digest version of it, but I joined LAFD, the fire department, as I like to say, in 1973. Prior to that, I was with the Whittier Police Department, and we lived a couple of doors down from a fireman from LA City. And at the time, I was working the criminal tactical unit in Whittier. And so I was getting home at 4:35, 5:30 in the morning, barely trying to keep my eyes open. And this guy's out there polishing his boat or polishing his camper. And I'd stop and ask him, I said, man, don't you ever go to work? He said, no, I'm on a 4-dayer. I'm going up to the lake to ski, or I took a segment off. I'm off for 13 days and I'm going up to Lake Topaz and camping and this and that. I said, man, this is for me. So on my birthday in 1972, I spent 8 hours in court on a drug arrest that we made that was kicked because a chain of evidence was broken. There was a missing signature, which whatever. So 8 hours, so I said, this is it. I'm done with this. So I talked to the fireman and he says, well, LA City's taking over the ambulance service in the city, which was previously run through the fire or through the police department. He says they're not hiring firemen. Wow. You hire that, you get on the ambulance, and then you just lateral over into the fire service. I said, well, that works for me. So they had the testing at Hollywood High School. And it was starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the line to take the written exam for ambulance driver, they were 4 abreast, and it wrapped around the block.
Holy
There was
smoke.
5,000 or 6,000 people taking this test.
Wow.
So I'm standing in line, and I looked at the guy that was next to me, and he was all dressed in white shirt, white pants, white shoes. He looked like, the old Good Humor ice cream guy. I asked him, I said, you going to be taking this test? And he says, yeah. He says, I work for a private ambulance company, a company named Goodhue. And I just got off work and came down here. This is what I want. This is it. So I was looking at him, and there was a drop of blood about the size of a quarter on the cuff of his pants. And I looked at it and I said, is that blood on your pants? And he said, oh yeah, we had a traffic accident this morning. I didn't change my pants. But I said, are you telling me that people are going to bleed on you in this job? And he says, oh yeah, it's all over. Well, I tell you, I started to get lightheaded and dizzy. And I said, I am not going to be doing this. I was getting ready to leave when they opened up the gates to the Hollywood High School, and everybody bum rushed in. So I kind of went in with it. I said, well, I'll take the written exam, but there's no way in heck I'm going to do this job. And I got a letter saying that I passed the written exam, and they want me to come down and do a physical agility test. Well, I figured it might be fun to do that just to see how physically fit I am or am not. So I took that and passed that. And then they gave me a background packet. And I said, well, this would probably be good to fill this out. It's good to have around the house because I didn't save the one from the police department. So I filled that out. And they called me and said that I passed everything. They want me to come down and take an oral interview. And oral interviews were kind of my forte, I thought. So I took the oral interview. And then they said, go downstairs and take a psych evaluation test with the city's psychologist.
Okay.
And that's where this thing got interesting, because I'm taking the test, and it's the 500 question personality test where they ask you the same question 4 different times. Everybody's taking them.
Yep. Yeah.
But
I know it well, actually.
And they're testing, ambulance guys and LAPD recruits. And each table had, somebody from the fire department, somebody from the police department. And the last part of the test, they passed out a blank piece of paper, and they said, draw a fruit tree. And
Okay.
I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of interesting. So I drew a little tree and, kind of colored it in a little bit. The guy next to me, this LA policeman, he's got a whole barnyard scene going, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe I misunderstood. So after that, to end the thing, they're showing the Rorschach ink blot test. You write down, they show you the ink blots on the screen, you write down 3 or 4 or 5 things that you see.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these ink blots, and I'm seeing wings and bird heads and worms and, stuff like that. And I'm looking over at this policeman, and he's seeing all kinds of sexual things. So he's writing down, nipples, penis, vagina, and so we go to the next one, and it's the same thing. I'm seeing the bird wings and the worms, and he's seeing all these things. So after it's all over, we're getting up to leave, and he tells me, he says, gosh, he says, I thought that was pretty easy. He says, how do you think you did? And I looked at him, I said, I'm thinking one of us is not going to get a job. And lo and behold, I got hired on, and that started my career in EMS. And throughout the years, I did 41 years. Throughout the years, this EMS, this fire department based EMS, it just became part of me. It was, you're spending so much time at the fire station with with your crew, and it was just, it was just a family. It was, it really became part of my personality, and I loved it. I don't think I ever worked a day in 41 years, and I never looked at it as a job. I looked at it as a calling. It was really what I was put here to do. And the things that I've seen and done, it's shocking. I could go for hours on stories of rescues and people that I've met and interacted with. So that's kind of how I got into the fire department. I turned down a promotion to be a supervisor twice because I loved riding the rescue and doing the first aid and advanced life support. And eventually they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I took the promotion to what was a senior paramedic. Then they changed it to EMS supervisor, and then they changed it to captain, and the rest is history.
Wow.
I probably had hundreds and hundreds of paramedics go through, my battalions and oversaw their training and evaluations and supervision.
Well, 41 years, I imagine They learned a lot from you for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I would have probably left a few years earlier. Um, my wife is a psychologist, Robin, love her to death.
Shout out to Robin.
Yeah, and love you, babe. But being married to a psychologist is an adjustment because there's nothing, no stories, nothing you can hide. She can read you, at least Robin, like a book, and she could tell when I came home from work what kind of day I had at work. She just it's shocking. It's like being married to your twin. There are no secrets. And so when I told Robin I was getting ready to retire, she looked at me. She said, "Man, you're just not ready. You know, we'll work on easing you out. If you leave now, you'll go through such a state of depression. You'll be difficult to live with." And so she
I appreciate the
did her
honesty.
thing.
Thank you, honey.
And you know, most people, you know, like you that live this lifestyle, you know, this calling, when you leave it, it's like, you know, losing an arm. It's like losing part of your soul.
Wow.
And
I'm going to hold on to this as long as I possibly can.
Yeah. Oh, I go back and still do it. I just don't want to wake up at dark 30 for you know, runny nose or
Yeah.
you know, I just yeah. So a lot of guys ask me after I've retired, because I was on the lecture circuit for a little while doing MCI stuff and talking about some of the rescues that I'd been on, and then I have a invention that I patented and started a business, and that business got bought out by some angel investors. But I went to several of the EMS expos to push this thing. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, because that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that was kind of a, you know, when you're on the job, especially when you're in elements of supervision and command, you have to kind of think out of the box a little bit. Yep. And that's how this whole thing came about, how I worked on developing the bike team for the fire department. We never had a bike medic team, and I was given the task with my boss to come up with putting paramedics on bikes for a DNC event in 1984.
Wow. And like bicycles, right? We're talking like pedal bicycles, right?
Yeah, bicycles. Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, you know, when I put this thing to get, well, one of the issues I have is I keep saying but I shouldn't. It was kind of a team effort between me and my boss and his boss. But one of the issues we had is I'd never known anybody that had a bike team. I didn't know anything about it. In fact, when I was speccing out the equipment for it, I was speccing out a 10-speed bike. That's what I thought we should use. I didn't know anything about mountain bikes and road bikes or anything like that. So I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. So when this particular project came up, I started making phone calls, and that's where I found out about the organization IPMBA, International Police Mountain Bike Association. I think they're in St. Louis. So I got in contact with some of those people, and they were mainly centered around law enforcement on bikes. But there are some agencies that tried to put medics on bicycles, because bicycles can go where ambulances can't.
Right.
And
good idea.
Yeah. So we kind of put the bike team together, and we originally had maybe 30 of our medics and EMTs, because we decided instead of putting 2 paramedics on the team, 2-man team, person team, excuse me, we would put 1 paramedic, 1 EMT. And outfit them with all the equipment that they needed, from AEDs that actually showed a rhythm strip to
Wow.
gin and all that stuff. We put it in 2 saddlebags, panniers they call them, and so all the equipment fit in the 4 bags on the 2 bikes, and off they went. And one of the first deployments that the teams had, I was deployed to supervise it, not on a bike, by the way.
Oh, that's too bad. That was going to be my next question. Are you cruising around on a bike and checking everybody out, like making sure all the bikes are?
No. If I'm going to be on a bike, it's going to have some wheels on the side, or a motor at least. And but anyway, so the first deployment of the bike team was at one of the first anyway was a Cinco de Mayo type celebration in East Los Angeles at a park. And there was hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people at this park celebrating. And everybody was cool. It was a good time. The medics were riding around and doing some PR stuff. People wanted to see the bikes and all that. A fight broke out. Somebody got hit in the head with a baseball bat and they went down. So the bikes responded, got to the guy within seconds, and did their advanced life support. He was still alive, but lethargic. But anyway, when we called for an ambulance, the ambulance couldn't get within a quarter mile of the place. There was so many cars parked.
Oh my gosh.
So the medics come to me, and I was hearing on the radio that they can't get any closer than this intersection is about a quarter mile away. What do you want to do? Well, I'm thinking, well, we got 2 choices. We can call for an air unit to come in and do an air evac, but then we'd have to empty the park. Or you guys are going to start coming up with the gurney, and we didn't have a backboard or anything to carry the patient on. You guys come up with a gurney, and when you get here, we'll load them up and off you go. Well, it took a little bit over an hour from the time that the rescue got on scene until the patient arrived in the emergency room.
Wow.
That's where I started thinking that there's got to be a better way. So I called around to all the departments that I had talked to in developing the team. I said, how do you move your patients? You know, we don't. We either helicopter them out or we wait till the ambulance gets there. And I said, well, there's got to be a better way. And so I got back to the station. I called one of my bike guys over, and I got a backboard. I got a refrigerator dolly off one of the fire trucks that we had.
Okay.
And I strapped the backboard to the furniture dolly, and then tied the furniture dolly off to the back of the bike. Because when I was a kid, when guys would go surfing at the beach, they'd tow their surfboard on the back of their bike. They'd tie the nose off to the seat post and put a set of wheels on the tail.
Right.
And okay, so I remember this. So I tried that. I tied everything off, put a body on the backboard, and you could not maneuver the bike very well because of the high center of gravity.
Okay.
And so through circumstance and stuff, I met an engineer. I was actually diving in Belize and met this guy there. We were talking, and what do you do? What do I do? And he says, well, I invent stuff. And I said, well, I just happen to have this idea. So I said, I need to have this backboard type. I need it to be collapsible so that it can be towed behind a bike and yet deployable so that we can put a patient on it, have the bike guys transport a patient from point A to point B. And so he's writing all this stuff down that I wanted him to do. And he kept saying, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And I said, fine. So about 6 months later, I get a phone call in my office, and he says, "Is this Captain Siegel?" And I said, yeah. He says, well, this is Mark Jackson from Fresno. How soon can you come to Fresno? And I said, I got two problems. I said, number one, I don't know who Mark Jackson is. And number two, why the hell would I ever want to go to Fresno? And so then he backed it up. Oh, I remember. And so we invented this collapsible backboard stretcher that's essentially like a two-pole stretcher that does a Z-fold on wheels. And the magic is when it's deployed and you put a patient on there, one rescuer with one hand can move a patient from point A to point B.
Wow.
And so we looked at it. Well, he says, you got to patent this. Mark, there isn't anything anywhere in the world that can do what this can do. And so I said, well, I don't know anything about patents. All I want to do is get something for the bike team to use. And, he says, Mark, you got to look at the bigger picture here. And this is huge. And so we hired a patent attorney. I got an opinion from the city attorney saying that I can patent it since I was on the job. And so we started a company called REX EMS for Rex Rapid Extraction, REXEMS.com. And we're international.
Wow.
All around the world. Different companies are still testing it. I'm on the advisory board, but I don't get involved in the business side. So we get, patent royalties and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a neat deal. But again, it gets back to, you got to think outside the box. Not everything cut and dry. And so I know they called me and said, we're sending 10 of these to the Northern Mariana Islands. And I looked at Rob and I said, I don't even know where the Northern Mariana Islands are. So,
I don't even know where they are. I'd have to Google that right now just to find out.
So there's 10 of these things in the Northern Mariana Islands. But they're airports are huge.
Oh yeah.
We've got them in the prison system. That way, one person, one guard can move a non-ambulatory prisoner, as it were. And the military loves it, apparently, because it only takes one guy with one hand to move a wounded soldier. The wounded soldier can go into a semi-Fowler position, which assists with head injuries or chest injuries, where you can't do it on a NATO stretcher or a skid. Ours can go from fully supine to semi-Fowler to full Fowler. And it only takes one rescuer to move the wounded soldier off the battlefield. And it only takes one hand, so he can have his gun hand free, and they consider it a force multiplier.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting story. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but
you know what? I quite enjoyed that.
REXEMS.com is the website. And they continue to update it and change things, but you should look at it. It's amazing. The magic that Mark designed with, the center of gravity and all the weight over the axle, so that and it's collapsible, it's backpackable.
Come on. I am absolutely going to check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, so
that all started from like coming bicycles,
that's how one thing leads to another, and
what a great idea.
Yeah, so that and it's just stuff like that. I didn't do it for my own personal benefit. Everything is there to number one, take care of the patient, take care of my guys, and that's I get questions. Do you miss the fire department? I get those questions all the time. And I tell the guys, the best way to describe it is, I miss the clowns and I miss the animals, but I don't miss the circus.
Yeah, right.
And in my little area that I live here in San Clemente, There's probably 8 retired firemen just in a 2 or 3 square block area. And the nice thing is I outrank them all. So it's a
that's
wonderful
awesome.
thing, because even though you're retired, even though you're not on the fire department anymore, you still bleed Seagrave red, and everything is captain and sir, and it's a lot of fun. And we got guys from Orange County Fire and South Pass and Costa Mesa, all the little towns around here. LA City, got a couple of guys here.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
anyway,
You guys got a full-on firefighter
again,
community.
You need, if you can, kind of keep me focused, because I go off.
Nah, this is good. Are you kidding me? We're gonna let this ride. Although, let me bring it back a little bit, because I am curious. Is after you get qualified, your very first rescue EMS call? We all kind of remember it. Do you remember yours?
I got two I got all kinds of very special, but the first one, I remember going on a shooting in it was Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles.
And this is after, mind you.
And I was
wait a minute, hold on.
September.
You said right off the get-go you had this guy that had a little blood on his uniform, and you're like, yeah. I don't want to do that. And now you're responding to a shooting.
Let me go back, because the second day of what we call our drill tower.
Okay.
I had never seen a dead body before.
So that's where we're going with this one.
we all the captains that were in charge of the class says, okay, we're going on a field trip, and we all climbed on the into the LAFD buses, and we're driving to LA County Hospital, and they pull into the coroner's office. And so we all get out, and the coroner is giving us a tour of the coroner's office. And
oh my God.
I can remember the smell, they have, there's dead bodies everywhere. And it was like going in a department store and you got men's clothing over here. I mean, it was like everybody was kind of nonchalant. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, my God, what did I get into? And this is, I thought we were just, going to squirt water and break things and go red light and siren down the street. I had no idea that ultimately, we were going to be touching people that aren't alive. And it was a shock. We had guys that we had to sit through an autopsy. And we had 2 guys, I remember, in the class pass out. When they, I'm sure you've seen autopsies, but when you're standing next to the bed, and it's just, it was a shock, and it was an interesting, but the shock of looking at that and seeing that, it got me through whatever hesitation I had. I can go through this. I can do anything. And
nice.
But it's and what was even more telling, although it was rather subtle, is the care and compassion and understanding that the staff was showing their the bodies that were on the table. I mean, you would think that they do this day after day after day. That's just, piece of meat. And it wasn't that way.
Wow.
And I think that they did that maybe because we were there, but it instilled in me that moment that these are not just, patients that we're going to see out in the field. They're human beings. They're people. They're sick or they're hurt, and they want you to help them, and they're looking at you to help them. The mother is crying, and she's got a baby that maybe had a febrile seizure or is coughing or whatever it is, and she's looking to you to help. And if you're so callous that this is just, another call, which I've heard them referred to as BS calls rather than what I consider them as basic service calls, that better be what you're referring to when you call
That's
it a
pretty
BS
good
call, especially when you work for me, because there is no such thing as a BS call. It's basic service, and you better act accordingly. And these are human beings. They're not patients. They're not pieces of meat. They're not numbers. And
I
that's
like that. I like that a lot,
I
actually.
instilled that in all the paramedics that work for me. And when we get new paramedics that come into the battalion and they say, "Oh, Captain Siegel is going to come over and talk to you," we give them the speech, your whole job is to take care of number one, and that's me. And you do that by doing your job. You take care of the patient. You do the right thing for the right reason. You have the patient's best interest in mind and the department's best interest in mind. I will always have your six. But you screw up, you take and run the system so you can get back to your dinner or get back to bed, and you leave a patient that should have been transported. You don't have to worry about the department. I will be the one to throw you under the bus, and I will get in it, drive it over you. And,
that's awesome.
Have these talks, and it's funny because the lovely wife is a psychologist, and her specialty was at-risk youth, sort of. And because she was a resident psychologist at a lockdown facility, their kids are a step away from the penitentiary. And she's always said, these children need boundaries and limitations. And they're going to push you until you give them boundaries and limitations. And actions dictate consequences, and the consequences are never a surprise. Well, rookies and my subordinates, I kind of treat them the same way. They needed boundaries and limitations. They need to know what they can do and not do, what's expected, and what's going to happen if they fall short. And all my correspondence at the bottom of my signature line, it's strive for perfection, settle for excellence, because satisfactory performance is not an option. I don't want somebody working on me that makes a mistake 30% of the time.
Right.
If you go through life saying, I just want to pass, I just want to get 70%, that's not good enough. And when I was growing up, love my dad, he's not here anymore, the greatest guy I've ever known. He used to come to me and say, Mark, amongst other things, he said, Mark, you're going to come to know two people that can walk on water, and you're looking at one of them. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. The guy was awesome. He was a Marine, and I believe he was a Marine Corps drill instructor at Parris Island. There wasn't anything he couldn't do, couldn't outwork. The guy was just an animal, and I loved him to death. But he taught me so many lessons through one-liners that we did, and I would do the same thing for my guys. That guys are going out and as part of an investigation or something I might do, I'd ask them, is this the hill you want to die on? Is that really where you want to go with this? Is that what you want to say? There's all kinds of stuff. But I used to tell the guys, everybody gets a smile, a blood pressure, and we had a mandatory transport policy that you offer transport to the patient, to the hospital. And so everybody gets a smile, a blood pressure, and a ride to the hospital. And if you do that, the chances of you getting into trouble, making a mistake, are reduced to almost nil. Hospitals didn't like it a lot because they were getting a lot of patients in their ER, but we weren't leaving patients alone. And,
Nice.
But the first couple of calls that I went on, I don't know how we got off on that, but
that's all right. Come on.
I warned you.
Keep it going. Keep it going. I like it.
September the 8th. It was September the 8th, 1974. And it was a shooting on in Skid Row. And it was a transient that had been shot in the ankle. And there was a couple of 2 or 3 patients. So I had one, and my partner had one, and another rescue showed up and they had one. And, we're all EMTs, just basic EMTs. So you bandage them up, you put them in the ambulance, you take them to the hospital. We were just starting the paramedic program back then. So we had paramedics, but they were few and far between. The next day, on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, was my picture leaning over this guy bandaging his ankle. And that was on my birthday on September the 8th. And it was on the front page of their 1974 edition.
All
my
right.
very first cardiac arrest as a paramedic. It was out of LA City's Fire Station 61, which is kind of the Fairfax area. It's kind of an older, established community, heavy Jewish enclave in that area. Some of the best food in the world on Fairfax Boulevard. And we had a patient who was in cardiac arrest, and we were sent by ourselves on a man down. When we got there, the patient was in cardiac arrest. So we had an old, I don't even know what, it was a defibrillator that was in a big blue box. And it was a monitor that was separate. I forget the number, it's been so long. And there was you connect the monitor to the defibrillator with a 1 millivolt cord. And then you have the patient cable connected to the monitor. And the thing weighed like 35 pounds. We got there, and it was just my partner and I, and we lay this thing out. We're trying to hook him up. And he says, "Mark, hook up the 1 millivolt." And I was so emotional, on this, my first car. I couldn't figure out where the 1 millivolt cord was. Just so happened, walking down the sidewalk at the time was off-duty Beverly Hills paramedic. And he jumped in and we worked all together and hooked everything up. I finally realized what I was doing, and it ended up being a save.
All right.
We defibrillated him. He went from VFib to an idioventricular rhythm, and then eventually sped up. And at least he survived the ride to the hospital. Don't know if he was ever discharged, but that's kind of that was my very first cardiac arrest as a paramedic.
Wow.
Then I've had some horrendous calls throughout my career. The 1991 US air crash at LAX that landed on top of a Metroliner. I was then an EMS captain. I was the very first EMS resource on scene. And
I gotta imagine, just out of curiosity, like the alarm goes off in the fire station or the EMS bay, and it's like you gotta like turn heads with that airliner crash. What?
Yeah. Well, what happens is the tower at LAX can tone out the fire stations in and around the airport. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 fire stations that get toned by the tower, who then calls our dispatch, and they supplement what they call a full alarm assignment.
Okay.
And so I had just left one of the fire stations that had a paramedic rescue. Just left that fire station, was actually going to get some dinner. So I was just outside LAX property, and I heard that the tones come out over the radio. Full alarm assignment. I think it was 24 right, aircraft down. And I turned my head. I remember looking over my shoulder back at the runways, and there was this huge black plume of smoke we call Luma. And the pucker factor went to about 10 right there. Yeah, I couldn't see what was burning. I can see the tail section of an airplane, but from the distance, I couldn't tell whether that was involved or not, but I assumed it was. So I got back through security, and I'm rolling red light and siren through the entrance, and the guards are supposed to raise the gate up so that we can get access to the tarmac. And I'm rolling red light and siren, and the gate's not going up. And because everybody was scrambling, they didn't know whether it was a terrorist incident or whatever, but they knew that an aircraft had blown up. So they're locking down the airport. Well, when they lock down the airport, you got to get the fire department in. Well, most of the fire stations, 80s and 95s, they have access inside the airport. They're actually stationed right. 80s is or crash 80s on the airport property. So the guards are told, if you see a fire engine or an ambulance or a staff car, red light and siren, you open up the gate. Well, as I'm coming down, I can't tell you how fast I was going, but I was going fast. The gate wasn't going up, so I'm trying to slow down and maneuver around, and finally the gate goes up and I get in. And I set up my tactical command post off the starboard wing about 500 feet. And you can see people on the wing coming out of the plug over the wing, jumping off the wing onto the ground. But they're not moving after that. And 80s had already set up, and they're pushing the fire to the port side so people can exit on the starboard side. And the noise was just crushing. I mean, their engines were whining, and I knew this was big. This was going to be big because I don't know if you've ever been up close on the outside of an airplane, but the 737, it's not a huge airplane by any means. But when you're standing next to it, it's enormous.
Oh, yeah.
And so 80s is tell the guys squirting the foam and stuff are telling the people that can stand up after they jumped off the wing to go over to that guy that's standing there in that staff car, which is me. So I'm by myself. I'm getting people starting to come over. And finally, one of the battalion chiefs that's there came over and says, "Mark, what are you going to need? You've got EMS." And, I'd always thought about what I would call for if I had a major incident. And I knew all the different positions, the incident command system and the EMS side of things in the medical group. And so I said, let me have 2 task forces, 5 engines, 10 paramedic ambulances, 10 private ambulances, and scramble all our air ambulances. And then I also asked them to scramble. UCLA had an air ambulance called MedStar that they used to transport. And I knew that they had a doctor that goes out on the ambulance, and I thought a doctor on scene might help. I had the microphone in one hand, and I've got a pad and paper on the hood of the car. I wasn't going to write anything because I didn't have any information yet, but I needed to have something in my hand. That was the only thing I could have in my hand that I wouldn't get arrested for. So as this thing starts to unfold, all these people are coming off. When I say all, I think there was, I'm trying to think, there was probably, I don't know, maybe 50 people coming off the plane, coming over to me. I forget the exact number. I have to look it up. Uh, and I'm getting overwhelmed. And in the meantime, my first rescue comes on scene. And in the back, they pull up, and the driver yells out through the window, "Where do you want me to take this patient?" And I said, "What patient?" I said, "In the back." So I opened up the door, and his partner was in the back with a patient that was critically burned.
Okay.
I mean, there's no way this patient's going to survive.
Yeah.
But these guys were so caught up with their patient that they weren't going to be any use to me. Their head wasn't in the game. And I understand that it was really dramatic. And so I sent them off to the closest hospital, and I'm waiting for my other resources to get there. Well, we ended up, LAX dispatched a bus to my tactical command post. And I told everybody that can walk, get on that bus.
Wow.
And I had an engine company that was assigned to me. I said, "You guys get on that bus and keep everybody on the bus that gets on the bus. Don't let them go anywhere." So out of all the people that were at my tactical command post, I now left with about 12 people that were critically injured, multiple fractures, smoke inhalation, burns, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was able to set up a system there to handle those 12 patients and get them off to the hospital. We flew 2 or 3 in air ambulances, and everybody else went by ground. And then of the people that were on the bus, we told them to go to Terminal 1, which is what US Air used as their terminal, and to hold them there because people are going to want to talk to them. And so as we got the people there, people that were in Terminal 1 started to develop symptoms. So we needed now another immediate care area, another delayed, and another minor care area there. So we actually set up 2 medical groups under a medical branch. And out of that, I think they transported 14 people out of Terminal 1 to the hospital to get first care. And then the other issue was, how do you identify the patients that are at the hospital? Because we didn't have time to ask for IDs. Some people couldn't talk. So I had the incident commander notify LAPD to send ident teams to the area hospitals, because we were able to tell them what hospitals got patients.
Yep.
And they could identify the patients at the hospitals. And the people that are experts really at identifying and getting ID are the admitting clerks in the ER, and they help tremendously. So, I can go for a couple of hours talking about that particular incident, but that was one of my bigger multi-casualty incidents. I think there was a total of 101 patients in the 2 airplanes that were involved.
Wow.
Because it was a 737 that landed on top of a Metroliner. The Metroliner had 12 people in it. They were all succumbed to their injuries. And then out of the 88 people, souls on board of the 737, I think there were a total of maybe 32 fatalities.
Wow.
And I walked the plane after everything was done. We got all the patients out. And so I actually went in the plane and walked it and saw where a lot of the fatalities were because not all of the exits were usable. The front exits weren't usable because they were crushed when the plane hit the building. So everybody was running toward the wing exits, and you can only use the starboard side wing exit because the port side was on fire. They couldn't go out that way. Wow. And it was just a horrendous scene to walk the plane and look at and see how the fatalities were, leaning over chairs or in the, they had all succumbed to asphyxiation. But the magnificent work that the crash crews did and the fire department did saved so many lives. It was just incredible. Wow. So that was one of my memorable mass casualty incidents. I've had a few single patient incidents that come to mind. I had a guy jump in the lion exhibit at the LA Zoo.
I'm sorry. He jumped into the lion exhibit?
Yeah. This is kind of an interesting story because we got a call of a DB at the LA Zoo. And it's just kind of unusual. And so my partner and I respond and we were guided in by security. They escorted us back to this area. And I heard this lion just roaring. I mean, loud. It was just tremendously loud. And we were met by several LAPD officers, a couple of detectives. And they looked at me and said, "There's a body inside the lion exhibit." And so I looked at him and I said, and you're telling me this because
you want me to do what?
Yeah, they said nobody from the zoo will go in and get the body. And I said, gee, I can't imagine why. So the way the exhibit is set up, there's a grassy area, and then below the grassy area on a kind of a sub basement area that visitors can't see are the cages that the lions are kept in when they're not on display, when they're being fed at night. They always get fed in these cages, and the cages are 4 feet high of cinder block wall and then chain link fence for another 4 feet.
Wow.
And access to them is through a little pathway that each cage has a guillotine door that you pull on this bar. The door comes up and the lion will go in to eat, and then the door comes down. And in between, there's 4 cages, and in between the 2 cages is a little pathway that leads to the pathway that goes up to the exhibit. And that's how the caretakers go in when the lions are caged up. They can go in and take care of the exhibit. Well, what happened is it's an Asian lion exhibit, and they couldn't, the male lion that was in that Asian lion exhibit with the 2 females wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, expanding the population, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
For whatever reason. And so apparently they got an Asian lion from a zoo outside of California. I think it was Denver. And they brought this Asian lion in to mate with the 2 females. And the lion exhibit keepers were at lunch, and he heard the lions just roaring. It was very unusual. And they said that it's probably Pookie, the male lion's name was Pookie.
Terrible name, but okay.
Yeah, was mating with the 2 females, and it gets kind of loud and raucous. So, but they didn't do anything about it. And after they got lunch, they came back and saw that the male lion was not in the exhibit area. The 2 females were asleep, but there looked like a down the stairs where they go to their night quarters. There was like a big pile of dirty clothes, and Pookie was on top of the dirty clothes, and he was pawing at it like you see a kitten do with a ball of yarn.
Yeah,
he was pawing at this thing. And so when they looked closer, they realized that the dirty clothes was actually a body. And so they turned the fire hose that they had on Pookie to separate Pookie from the body, and Pookie went into his night quarters, and he was pissed. He was pissed because he was wet and he was pissed because he's no longer with his meal. And so that's when they called us, and they said, somebody's got to go in and get the body. And so I looked at my partner and I looked at Pookie, and, we didn't think, hey, Pookie's secure. So I guess we can just crawl in, throw the body on a disaster litter and drag the body out. It's not any big deal,
Yeah.
Well, as we opened up the one guillotine door, we start crawling through to get to the second guillotine door, which is then open to the pathway to the display. And as we were halfway down this little walkway, we heard gunshot rounds being cranked into a magazine, the shotguns being chambered. And I stopped and I looked back, and there's 3 shotguns pointing right over our head through the chain link fence. And I told my partner, back up, back up, back up. So we backed out of that thing. I said, is there something you guys want to tell me here? He says, well, there's 2 female lions, but they're asleep up top. And in case one of them wakes up, there's nothing between you and the lions until you get behind the guillotine door. So we just would scare them to stay up on top. And I said, well, that's the end of that song. That's not going to happen. You can dart them and put them to sleep and bring them down in their quarters. Once they're all secure, I'll go get your body for you, which they did. They didn't want to because they thought they might be pregnant, and the tranquilizer darts might cause them to miscarry, and they didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
I told them, I said, hey, you want the body out of there? The ladies need to go to sleep.
Holy cow.
And so it was interesting because after we got the lions down, they tranquilized them, and then the keepers drug them down. They're huge animals. I went up with a couple of homicide detectives because they said, can you tell the difference between human bones and bones that from food that they would eat? And I said, I don't know. I said, I can do what I can. So I actually went up and walked the exhibit with the detectives, and we didn't find any bones per se up there, but we did find crucifix and a Bible.
Wow.
And it turns out that the Bible had like a paper clip. And when you opened up the Bible to where the paper clip was, highlighted was passage of Daniel and the lions.
No way.
And so the detective, being as they are, I'm kind of compassionate and understanding. The detective says, well, I guess the Pookie, the lion, didn't read that passage because we found a blood smear on the wall where this guy climbed up a palm tree, and there's a 15-foot high wall at the back of the exhibit, and there's a palm tree behind that. He got back into the service area, then climbed up this palm tree and was sitting on this wall. And the wall goes up and then it curves in to keep the animals from jumping over, as if I don't think they can do 15 feet. But anyway, he sat on this curved part, and then the curved part broke and he fell into the exhibit. And we found a blood smear 9 feet up from the ground, which is where Pookie had made initial contact with the guy as he was falling down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And if you looked at the guy's back, it looked like somebody took an ice pick and there was like 100 holes in his back all over.
Oh.
And that's from Pookie and his claws just clawing at him like he was doing a ball of yarn. It was shocking. Yeah.
Oh.
And Pookie, it was shocking. So it turns out that the CAO, this is in addition to the story, the CAO's office is auditing the fire department. And one of the auditors came to the fire station to ride out with me. And this was years later, and I happened to tell her the story about Pookie and the lion and the guy. And she says, "Oh my goodness, my husband was one of the assistant veterinarians there. I remembers that incident." He says, "Do you remember, or did you know that Pookie was the only man-eating lion in captivity, and the LA Zoo was sending 8x10 glossy pictures of Pookie to other zoologists so that they can study Pookie to see how it would affect them being a man eater?" And she says, "Would you like to have one of the 8x10s of Pookie?" And I said, "I'd love it." So about a week or so later, I got an 8x10 glossy publicity photo of Pookie and the lion, and it's hung up in my room in the upstairs.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was an incredible call.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can go.
But that's one of those abnormal calls. You're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. You want me to do that?
Up, if you do a Google search of man falls in lion exhibit at LA Zoo, it'll have an article on this particular incident. The guy that was eaten by Pookie.
I am absolutely going to look that up. 100%.
Yeah, look it up.
All right.
Yeah. So, and then, if you're doing this job long enough, you're going to get sued one way or another. And I've had my fair share of lawsuits. Some are more memorable than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I'll tell you this one story, and then you can ask me the question. Okay, one story. I'm riding a rescue, and I've got a rookie riding with me. He's been with me for like 4 or 5 shifts. Already went through paramedic training and his internship and stuff, and now was passed and he's working with me. So we get the call of a cardiac arrest, and it was on the steps of the Music Center in downtown Los Angeles. And so we drive up, and there's a little crowd at the sidewalk, and laying with her feet up on the sidewalk and her body is out in the street looks like a lady, maybe 70, 80 years old. And I could look at her as we pulled up, and you can just tell this is not well. She's dead. I mean, you can see her eyes are glazed over. It's just is not going to go well. So I'm thinking, I haven't seen this kid on a cardiac arrest yet. We're going to work this patient up. So we get out, and I tell him, okay, let's start working it up. I'll do chest compressions, and I want you to control the airway, prepare to intubate, to see how he does under pressure. So we had just been issued these new bandage scissors. They've got a black handle. Everybody carries them now. Before we used to have the old Lister bandage scissors.
So I'm not familiar with those, but I know the penny shears pretty well.
Okay, so the shears, I remember the guy came out to do the demonstration. He can cut a penny with them.
Yeah, hence the reason of penny shears.
So these shears. So I happen to have mine, and so I get this lady. We get her out. We're laying her in the street so we can do chest compression. I took my scissors out, and I felt bad, but she had this beautiful white beaded gown. I mean, it was gorgeous. And her husband, about the same age, he's crying and, please help my lovely wife and all this stuff. And there's a crowd around. But, I got to do chest compressions here. So I take my handy dandy scissors that can cut a penny, and I started at the top, and I went all the way down to her belly button, opened it up, and I'm doing chest compressions. In comes the engine company to back us up, and we start doing our ALS workup. We gave her a couple of rounds of drugs. Didn't seem to be getting anywhere. So I said, okay, let's load her up and start heading to the hospital. So while we're en route to the hospital, the fireman that's bagging her using a BVM says, I think she's bucking against the tube. And I said, oh, that can't be. So I said, okay, let's stop CPR. And I checked for a pulse. looked at the monitor, and she's in an idioventricular rhythm, but I wasn't feeling any pulse. So I'm figuring, well, it must be all the drugs that we gave her, but either way, let's hope for the best. So let's continue CPR. So we continued CPR, and she started visibly bucking the tube. And I said, wow. So I said, let's stop CPR. And I checked for a pulse again. And sure enough, I got a pulse. And I said, wow, this is going to be good. So make a long story short, we get her to the hospital. She arrested twice in the hospital while we were sitting there doing our paperwork. And they brought her back each time. We then get a call, so we had to leave. I didn't get back to the hospital for 4 days, and I got back went into the ER and asked the staff there, how'd our patient do? And they keyed it up on the computer and looked, oh, she's up in the coronary care unit. I said, oh, great. We brought back, somebody that's brain dead.
Yeah.
So I went up and talked to the one of the nurses up in the coronary care unit. I said, you tell me which bed Mrs. whatever her name is in? So she looked at the chart and says, oh, she's in bed 2. And so I stuck my head in, and here's this lady sitting up talking to this little old man like nothing had happened. And I went back to the nurse and I said, you must be mistaken. That can't be the same patient. And so she pulls the chart and hands it to me, and I open up the chart and I look at it, and there's my run sheet in the chart. So I went back in and I introduced myself to her, and I always, tried to be nice. And I said, do you remember anything about it? She said, no, don't remember anything at all. And the husband says, oh, I remember you. And so we shook hands. I gave her a little kiss on the cheek, and then I left. About 7 months later, I get a letter from the city attorney's office. And in the packet, it says that the city of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Fire Department, and Mark Siegel are named in a lawsuit. And the lawsuit value was set at $5,000, and the reason for the loss was the cost of the dress. And I was flabbergasted. So I called the city attorney up, and I said, "You've got to be shitting me! I'm getting sued for the cost of the dress for a lady that I saved, when any other paramedic probably would have just pronounced." And he said, yeah, don't worry about it. We're just going to pay it. It's cheaper for us to pay the $5,000 than to assign investigators and do all that and go to court and do all that. It's easier just to pay the $5,000, make them go away.
That's terrible.
And so sure enough, I needed to write a letter of what I did at the scene, just, for the documentation. And they cut her a check and it all went away. That's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. That's pretty unbelievable. Yeah. You saved my life. I would at least say thank you. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Come on, Mark.
It's unreal. But that's just all kinds of things.
Wow.
We had a paramedic. He came to me. I was actually in the parking lot of County Hospital, and he had delivered a patient there. And he came to me while I was in my staff car. He said, I need to talk to you. And I said, oh, all right, come on in and sit down. And the guy was in tears. And I said, what is going on? And he said, well, they ran a call at the jail, and it was a hanging. The guy committed suicide at the jail. We got him down. We worked him up and then pronounced him at the scene. We just weren't getting anywhere. And the family is suing county because they run the jail and the fire department, and this particular medic is being named in a wrongful death lawsuit. And he just could not handle it. He could not handle that he's being sued in a wrongful death. And emotionally, he was so strung out over the fact that he's being sued. And I told him, I said, look, nothing's going to happen to you. We have 2 floors of attorneys at City Hall that do nothing but handle these things. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Relax, do your job, and you'll be fine. It affected him so bad that he resigned a week later from the fire department.
Wow.
And I believe he moved to Arizona and started a pool cleaning service there.
Wow.
And I talked to him about a year afterwards, and he seemed to be pretty happy. But stuff like that happens, and it got to him. So I mean, things can happen both ways.
That's terrible, though. Like that's.
Told me, I used to tell the guys that if you haven't been sued, you haven't run enough calls. Yeah.
Dang, man.
Like I mean, it happens a lot. Like I said, LA City's got 2 floors of attorneys that do nothing but that type of work, and
wow.
You just got to understand that there's all kinds of people out there, and it is what it is. And this is the job that you signed up for. And if you consider it a job, you'll never make it.
Yeah.
It's got to be a calling. It's got to be in your soul. This is what you were made to do.
Yeah, I very much agree with that.
Yeah.
So with all these stories that you've got, Jason and I have talked, and he was mentioning like some other stuff that you guys had. You guys worked together, and then there was something about hypnosis, and then there was a case down in was it Guatemala where you jumping in the ocean and just.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you what, just pick a story. If you want to start with down diving, I'm all in.
Yeah, well, let's I can do the diving thing pretty easy.
Okay.
That was a live aboard dive boat that I went on in Papua New Guinea. Now, Papua New Guinea is not really overly civilized. And so we were told when we got on the boat that we will only go on shore once and we won't leave the boat, because allegedly, rumor had it that there's 5 tribes that really control Papua New Guinea. And the tribes don't necessarily get along with one another. And there's one town that is populated by kind of the non-tribesmen, or more the civilian population. But it's kind of a high crime area. So we were told by the boat captain that if we do go ashore for supplies and stuff, us divers will probably have to stay on board the boat unless he can make arrangements with the town folk that we can come in, but it would be for a short visit. So anyway, we're doing 5 dives a day in Papua New Guinea. And on one of the dives, we noticed that whenever we were at anchor, usually in one of the fjords near the island, so we were maybe a half mile to a mile out from the island, people from the locals would come out in outrigger canoes, and they would come up to the back of the boat. And these outrigger canoes had the dugout canoe part, and then it had the outriggers. And then on the outriggers, they had like a sheet of plywood or a sheet of corrugated steel, whatever they would find. And they would put their fish and stuff, whatever they catch on there, and take it back in. And sometimes, they would have some of the kids, we noticed, would ride on there. And they would come out to the boat, and they would trade fresh fruits and vegetables that were grown on the island. And our cook, who spoke a little bit of the language, they call it like pidgin English, he would give them bars of soap and bags of rice. That's what they wanted. And so I thought that was kind of fascinating. So what happened was We had just finished, I think, our third dive of the day. So it was really kind of early afternoon, maybe about 1 o'clock. And after the dive, I was up on the top deck, kind of warming up, getting some sun. And the boat is, I think it was about 112 feet long. And it was for 3 decks above and 1 deck below. So I was probably 30 feet above the water line. And I happened to be watching this young lady, one of the natives, and she was rowing out toward the boat, and she had a little baby in her arms, and she had 2 young boys. One was probably 6 and one was probably 8, and they were doing most of the rowing out to the boat. And they did their thing. I saw them exchange some vegetables with the cook, who gave them bars of soap and bags of rice. And so I went back and kind of laid down, and I heard a scream, and I looked over the rail, and I saw the boat tip over. The boys all leaned off to one side of the boat, and the outriggers came up, and it was like in slow motion. It kind of rolled over like that.
Yeah.
The mother had the small baby in her arms, and she went underwater, and the boys fell in the water, and they were trying to swim back to the outrigger, but there was a pretty strong current. And we were told earlier that day that hammerhead sharks were schooling about a mile down current. And so they were debating whether we were going to go diving at that spot or close to that spot or not. But anyway, so when I saw the mother go underwater with the baby, I just jumped over the railing about 35 feet or so. And I aimed right for where she was. And I probably went down probably 10 or 15 feet underwater, and I could just make her out because, I wasn't wearing any gear. I didn't have a mask on or anything. So I could just make out a silhouette, and I kind of kicked over to where she was, and I grabbed the baby. And she wouldn't let go of the baby. She was still fighting. So I pushed her away from the baby and grabbed the baby. And I grabbed the baby by the neck like this, and I started kicking to the surface. And I was running out of gas, and I could look up, and I said, I still got like 5-6 feet to go before he. And I was running out of gas. I didn't think I was going to make it. And so I kicked really hard, really hard, and I broke the surface. And I held my hand up with the baby in the hand. And one of the crew who was in the back helping the cook do the exchange happened to get into our chase boat, our little dinghy.
Yep.
It was a big boat, but they would take us to the dive site, so we didn't have to dive off the mothership, as it were. And so he had come around to me, and I said, great. And I handed him the baby, and I thought he was going to wait for me to go down and get the mother and come back up, but he took off. I don't know whether, so I said, shh, yeah, I gotta go down and get the mother. And I was gassed, and I'm looking around, and there wasn't anybody else outside the boat. They were all down eating lunch. And so I dove back down to where the mother was, and I searched around 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and I happened to see her silhouette. So I grabbed a hold of her, and I kicked back up to the surface. I didn't think I was going to make it, but I kicked her back up to the surface, and I put her in front of me, so her back was to my chest, and I just rolled over on my back to try and float just so I can get some strength back.
Yeah.
And she didn't think that she was breathing. She wasn't moving. And so I put my arms around her chest, and I started to do chest compressions as best I could. And it took 2 or 3 of the chest compressions and she started to cough up some water. And by that time, Stanley, which was the deckhand, came back around with the boat. And I looked in the boat and the boys weren't in there, which is where I thought he went. But he went and grabbed the mother, threw her in the boat. And then I was going to try and get in the boat because I was wasted. And he took off again. So I'm sitting here in the water and I looked over and I saw the outrigger was probably 100 yards away. And it was being pulled down to where the hammerheads were. So I said, well, I'll just swim over to the outrigger. And I got to the outrigger, and then another diver from the boat saw what was happening and he dove in. And so the two of us got to the canoe where the two boys were, and we tried to flip it over, and you just couldn't do it. We just couldn't do it. So the two of us and the two boys, we held onto the outrigger canoe and kicked toward shore. And we finally got to the shore. There was probably 20 or 30 of the tribe at the shore, but they weren't really coming into the water. They wouldn't get in the water more than maybe knee deep, because it turns out they don't swim in the ocean. Anytime they go in the ocean, they go in boats. Otherwise, they just go up to knee deep or something to do that. For some reason, they just don't swim in the deep water like that. But anyway, so we handed off the family to the tribe, and they just turned and walked away. They didn't say anything or do anything, and we didn't speak their language. So we got Stanley had come back and picked us up in the boat and took us back. So it was the source of some conversation at night at dinner. The next morning, we did a morning dive at about 7, came up and we were eating breakfast, and we hear these drum beats in the distance. And it was, da-doom, 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 da-doom. And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? So we all went to the dive deck and looked out, and coming out of this fjord were these huge canoes, and these natives were dressed in battle dress, it looked like, really ornate. I hate to call them dresses, but the guys were all dressed in these wraps. Yeah. And there were women in there, and they were beating these drums. And there was a guy in front of each of the 3 boats who was standing there with this huge spear. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is it. We're going to be under attack. And I didn't have any idea. Well, it turned out that the tribe decided that they were going to have a celebration, what they call a Sing Sing, for us for saving these 3 members of their tribe. And so they came in, and the guy at the front, and I got to send you his picture. He's a little guy, couldn't have been more than 5'6", but he was the chief of the tribe, and he had this outfit on. I really can't describe it. And I got in his boat, the cook got in his boat, and the other diver that went out with me got in his boat. And then the other divers and some of the crew got on the other boats, and we were taken back down this fjord. And when we made landfall, there was a line. I got some pictures. There was a line of probably 20, I call them warriors, and they were doing this line dance up, and the drums were beating. I mean, it was almost hypnotic. I thought it was a Disney movie or something that we were going to see. But anyway, they had this big Sing Sing and feast, and we were eating fresh fish, and they had pigs on the islands. So we had pork and lobsters and vegetables like I've never tasted before. So we were there for probably a half a day, and we went around, and they took us in their huts where they lived. But the best thing about it, other than that, was most of the tribesmen, their mouth was all red, and I thought it was like makeup, but it wasn't. It wasn't lipstick on their lips. It was their gums and teeth. And it turns out that they chew this stuff called betel nut.
Oh, I am familiar.
It's almost a hypnotic. And as they chew this betel nut and they start getting a buzz, they can neutralize the burning sensation that it has by putting this powder from, they grind up seashells. So it's got like a carbon, some sort of, or calcium, whatever it is in there. And it neutralizes this betel juice, but it turns their saliva and all their gums bright red. And so when they come and laugh at you and smile with you and stuff like that, they smile, their mouth looks like it's full of blood. Yeah. And the women are doing it. Even the little kids were doing it. It was awesome. So that they offered us some, and I said no. But some of the guys did it, and they tried it, spit it out. Then they'd all laugh. But the best thing about it, after it was, after the Sing Sing, they brought me out, and the chief presented me with this this giant trident shell that it had to be probably 18 inches long. I mean, it's huge. Presented, and it was his possession. And the captain of the boat, who knew, some of the people were saying that at this Sing Sing that, they're going to offer you a gift or something like that. And, one of my dive buddies says it's probably going to be his daughter or something. But so I do have a picture, I'll have to send it to you, of one of the ladies of the tribe. And she is tattooed from head to toe. I mean, it was, and the more tattoos you have, the more beautiful you are in the tribe. And of course, they just wear skirts, they're topless, but they have beads on. And so I had to have my picture taken next to this young lady, and I'll send you that picture. But
yeah, please.
Afterwards, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll see if I can get that to you. But that was it. They made me an honorary member of the Yari Yari tribe in Papua New Guinea. I'm probably the only white guy that's ever done that. So. And,
my God!
Actually, when the California State Firefighters Association found out about it, somebody wrote in about this off-duty fireman that saved these 3 people and the baby, and so they gave me a Medal of Valor for it.
What?
City of Los Angeles, the fire department, they didn't do much. I think I got the story printed in the magazine, but that was it. But the CSFA, California State Firefighter Association, gave me a Medal of Valor for it.
That is hilarious. That's awesome.
That's how I became a member of the Yari Yari tribe. If you ever come on back, stay here for free. We have a hut for you. So
that's kind of awesome. It's my hut. I've got a hut.
The pictures, it doesn't do justice without the photos, and I wish there was a way I can put the photos on the presentation here, but I've got them on, and I'll send them to you.
That's hilarious.
But Jason, I had Jason and his younger brother Brian from the time they were little kids. I had them coming to the fire station because they're going to follow in Dad's footsteps, and we're going to have a family tradition on the LAFD. So they would come to the station. They knew the inventory. They knew how things worked. They knew, how to attach sections of hose and what the difference between a 2.5 and a 1 inch or an 1 3/4 hose. They could do all that. And for some reason,
It didn't quite work out initially, but Jason, in part of his kind of an orientation, is he would come out and ride with me.
Okay.
But at the time, we could approve our own ride-alongs, and you know, because I was, you know, in as a staff car and as an EMS captain, you know, I always had ride-alongs with me, either the news or you know, people trying to sell equipment to the fire department. They'd come out and ride with me and talk about this equipment and whether I think it'd be a good idea or not. But I had press right out with me a lot. And so I had New Year's Eve, I think it was 97, Jason decided he wanted to come out and ride with me. Now, Jason pulled real hard from his mother's side, so he looked Hispanic.
He does a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. There you go, Jay.
He buzzed his head. And so he's got this buzzed head. And so I'm assigned in East LA, which is a heavily Hispanic area. And Jason had some tattoos at the time. And so, you know, I had him cover his tattoos with a brush jacket. And I told him whenever we get out of the car on an incident, he stays right next to me. He had a helmet on and the brush jacket and stuff. So he looked the role. And one of the my SOPs when I'm out in the car and I'm driving around is I monitor several different frequencies. You know, our dispatch frequency, our car-to-car frequency, command frequencies, and then they issued us LAPD. What they call rovers or handy talkies.
Okay.
They were called an Astro radio. And so I would put on the LAPD dispatch frequency for the division and where I was located. And Jason would ask me, you know, what are you listening to LAPD for? You know, we got to listen to the EMS calls so we don't miss something. And I said, I don't miss those, but you know, thanks for understanding. But, you know, I listen to LAPD because, you know, we are pursuit city in California, especially Los Angeles. And when there's an LA police pursuit going on, you don't want to get anywhere in the area because you're going to have police cars coming from all different directions to try and set up for this. So when I hear a pursuit coming down to the south of us, I'm heading north and just to try and get out of the way. But I can also hear if there's an officer needs help call come out. And so I had never heard one in all the years that I've been doing this. I hadn't heard one in an area where I could have an impact, except on this night on New Year's Eve. It was going into 1998 from 1997. Jason was riding out with me. And so we're driving around and we had just left County Hospital and we're just, you know, cruising around and it's getting close to midnight. And at midnight we head for the station. We don't go out because everybody's firing bullets up in the air and you know, everything that goes up has to come back down.
Yep.
And so we're staying out of the area. So it was close to midnight. We started to kind of head back. He was going to be through for the night. And the Astro radio, the LAPD rover, exploded with a voice of, I think it was like, officer needs help, officer's down, shots fired, officer needs help. And the voice put out the street address where this was. And I'm thinking to myself, man, we're like 5 blocks away from there.
Oh, wow.
So I looked at Jason, I said, there's an officer that's been shot. We're going to head over there. You stay in the car. Do not get out of the car. And, yeah, you know. And of course, he's saying BS on that. You know, I'm not going to miss this. If you can go, I can go.
Yeah, I would be.
Well, you know, Jason. All right. So anyway,
Sure thing,
So
Doc.
I
Sure.
lit it up, and I'm flying down the street, getting to the shooting location. And so I pulled out at the end of the block, and the actual address was mid-block. And I can still hear shots being fired. And I'm thinking to myself, normally I would hang back till we get an all okay and it was safe and secure. But I got an officer that's been shot. And if the officer's got a chance, if we got a chance to save his life, I got to act.
Right.
So I put out and I responded to an officer shot on our dispatch frequency and told him to dispatch, support an RA and an engine company for manpower, and that I was on scene and going in. So I grabbed my handy talkie. Of course, we have our ballistic vests and helmet, and I started to run down the street, and I hear footsteps behind me. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, did I just get trapped? And I turned around, and there's Jason running behind me with, and I said, oh, now what do I do?
I told you to stay in the truck. Hell
Yeah.
no.
And he's bigger than I am. So, I know where he sleeps. And eventually he's going to close his eyes and I can get at him. But other than that. But anyway, so I said, okay.
Come on, Jason. Dad knows what's up.
And so I'm running down and I get next to this LAPD unit. And we were probably 2 houses north of the actual incident. And I asked the officer, where's the downed officer? And they pointed to this front yard, 2 houses down. And they're still at the units down there was still an intermittent shot or 2 being fired into the house and from the house out. So I'm thinking, well, if this officer's got a chance, I'll see if I can get in. If they can put cover fire or just cover me, I can pull this officer out and we can do something. Probably stupid thinking, but so I
Tactical situation.
Officer,
I'm all in.
Yeah. And I said, hey, cover me. I'm going to go pull your officer out. And I thought that they would just make sure that nobody, that they would force everybody to keep their head down. No, there was a barrage of gunfire from LAPD that the area was covered with smoke. So I was able to get in. I grabbed the officer and I saw he had a pretty significant head wound. And I pulled him out to the sidewalk and then down the sidewalk. And when I can finally start working on him, I noticed he had a fairly significant wound on the left side of his head. And, they bleed really severe.
Right.
So I took my uniform shirt off and used it as a field dressing to try and put pressure on it. And by that time, my guys got there and we packed him up, put him in the ambulance. And I rode to the ambulance, in the ambulance with him. I told the captain from the engine company that, there's my car, or we always keep a key outside so somebody can access it. And to follow me up to county hospital where we were taking the officer. It was the closest trauma center at that time. And I told the captain on the engine, I said, this is my son. I know there's many like him around here, but this is my son. Do not let him out of your sight. Get him up to county with me. So we transported the officer up to county. It turned out that it was a fatal wound.
Oh, that's too bad.
But, I was just, in those days, we didn't know anything about PPEs or anything like that. So, I'm covered with blood. And so I'm in washing my hands and arms off. And, I threw my uniform shirt away. that was Jason's one of his first experiences in riding with the, with the fire department. And so I think that might have got him to be thinking, maybe there's something else I want to do here. And so he ended up actually becoming a hard hat commercial diver instead of coming on the fire department. And
Wow.
my youngest son, we did the same thing. He went to LAPD and he became a police officer. So I did not do well with those two decisions. But it is what it is.
Hey, you know what? They're doing pretty well. So
yeah, they're doing really
Yeah.
well. In fact, Jason's come full circle now. He's doing search and rescue. He's
Yeah.
a crew chief on a helicopter.
it's beautiful.
And doing training. So he's doing really well, and Brian's doing really well in his endeavors now. So
my
it is
gosh.
what it is. But, that was his.
Maybe if he had stayed in the truck, he would be following your footsteps. Way to
yeah,
go, Jason.
maybe, that was it. But it was interesting because I don't know if Jason told you, but one of the, he started riding out with me about 6 p.m. right after dinner at the station. And so we were hitting some of the local entertainment venues and looking at some of the people in Hollywood and kind of the West Hollywood area, seeing how the pretty people party.
Okay.
And he just couldn't believe it. But there was a place in Hollywood called Plato's Retreat. Now I had been in calling in there before, and I wanted to take Jason there, but it had closed down. But Plato's Retreat, this is a little side story. It was a adult New York-based sex club, and it had opened up in Hollywood. And it was a members only type of club, but on certain nights they would open it up to the public. And women could come in for free, but men had a cover charge to pay. And there was no clothing allowed inside the club. You had a towel. And so we had a call. This call that I had in there was for an unconscious female. And I hadn't been in the club before this call. So we got a call. We came in through the front and we're looking around and there's all these people in there and nobody's got any clothes on. And this was a high-end place. I mean, they got a full-on bar, little restaurant area, and the women had towels on. Most of the women only had towels around their waist, and the guys had towels, and they would wear them around the waist, or they could choose not to wear them at all. But anyway, Reader's Digest version here, we get the security guy takes us through this mezzanine area where they had jacuzzis and people were in these jacuzzis, back through it was a door into a hallway, and on either side of the hallway were a series of rooms. And we went into this room, and the room had a bed in it, nothing else. And I could see that this young lady that was on this bed was postictal from a seizure. And so my partner's tending to the female, and I was talking to the guy that was in there with her, trying to get a little history and physical. And he said that, I just met her at the bar, and we came up here to, do the nasty, and right in the middle of doing the nasty, she went into this convulsive type seizure. And it was the most incredible sex I've ever had.
I'm sorry, I did not see that coming.
Just like that. It was the most incredible sex I've ever had.
Oh my God.
And so I said, well, I think I figured out what's going on. And so we treated her, and she did not have another seizure while we were there, but we dropped the line, did the usual stuff, transported her to the hospital. And I so wanted another call in that place. It had closed down, but I wanted to, you know, run it by, you know, when I had Jason riding out with me and show him the way other people tend to party. You know, you think you know how to party. It's nothing compared to these places. So that was Plato's Retreat. That's a great, if you had the chance to see if they still have an entry in Google about Plato's Retreat.
Okay.
So if you Google it, it's
I'll check it out.
more background. But anyway,
Oh my goodness.
I got off on a little sidetrack.
No,
there,
I love it. This is
Yeah.
what I love about this, is that all these stories
Yeah.
come up and it's stuff
Yeah.
that we get called to. You can't make it up. You're like,
No, you know, everybody's telling me you got to write a book. You got to write a book. You got to write a book.
gosh.
And you know, the one big incident, you know, that other than the bit in Papua New Guinea, you know, I had went on a little boys trip to Mexico. We went to a little town. I should give you a little background. It's a little town called Mulahay, and it's on the peninsula side of Baja California,
Okay.
and on the bay side. So my partner at the time, well, this was the hypnosis story that you asked me about. Like, oh, I really should say, because it's embarrassing. But
Whatever.
I'll try and do the Reader's Digest version.
No
but
way.
it's really
No
a
way.
fascinating
No.
story.
The full story is so much more fun.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Well, anyway, my partner was a pilot, had a private pilot's license. And so he said that he wanted to take a trip down to Mexico in the plane. And he asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, well, yeah, you know, I'll go. And he says, well, it's a 6-place plane. So it'll cost a lot less if we can get, you know, 4 other people to go beside you and me, because we'll all split the cost. So we got another paramedic to go, another fireman to go. And this other paramedic shows up with his girlfriend. And so that's all that's going on. And another, so there was another paramedic. There was 4 guys and this nurse, this girlfriend of this paramedic. And so we get in this airplane at El Monte Airport, and we fly down to Mulahay. Now Mulahay, this hotel there has its own airstrip. It's a very exclusive hotel
Okay.
that my partner had been to before. Very exclusive, you know, kind of high-end private thing. And so as we were flying in and we're getting close to the hotel, we see smoke coming from where the landing strip for the hotel is. And it's pretty significant, Luma, black smoke. And so Jason, or my partner, Dennis, he brings the plane in and then banks it where the airport, where the landing strip was, and the landing strip begins at a gully. So there's a big gully, and then the strip goes into where the hotel is. And in this gully was where the smoke was coming up. So he circled again, because I thought I saw a tail section of an airplane. And so he said, I'll buzz it again and see, just to make sure. So he came around, buzzed again, and sure enough, I can see the tail section of an airplane. I could not see any props because it ended up being a jet aircraft. The fuselage was pretty much gone. I could just see a little bit of the nose section. So he goes down to make his approach, and there's no tower, it's a private little thing here. So we're just coming in, and we come in and land, and some of the kids from the Pueblo that's attached actually in Mule itself, were running down to the airplane, to grab the bags and so we give them some money or something, I guess, I don't know. So one of the firemen that came with us spoke Spanish. And so he spoke Spanish to some of the kids there. And they said that earlier, about an hour before we arrived, or about an hour and a half or so, there was a plane crash, and that there were 2 survivors from this plane crash, and there were 2 fatalities in this plane crash. And so he asked where the survivors were, and they were in the clinic up in the little town of Muley. And so my partner at the time, Dennis, says, let's go down and see if we can find some identification or something, because I doubt that anybody here is going to call family from the people who perished or the survivors.
Yeah.
And let's go see what's there. So we ran down to this thing while the other guys got our luggage and everything into the rooms. And as we got down there, he found the cockpit and was looking through the cockpit for the logbook, owner's manual, to see who the plane was registered to and any flight information. And I found a briefcase. And so I opened up, as I opened up the briefcase, I looked in, and there was, just a bunch of papers in there. And right about that time, we got buzzed by a Federale aircraft, their green Mexican government aircraft.
Okay.
And then Dennis said, let's get out of here. They'll arrest us if they catch us down here. So we started running up the hill, and we got to the top just as this airplane landed. So Dennis went up to talk to the pilot and asked what was going on. And he was sent over there by the government to fly the 2 survivors from Muley to a hospital in Guaymas. And the name of it, well, don't worry about the name of the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, and well, I'll tell you why in a second. So just about then, there was a trail of dust coming down this dirt road from the little town of Muley to the landing strip. And when they got there, there was 2 station wagons. So I put my head in the back of one, and there was a young lady, probably in her 40s, in the back of this station wagon, laying on this mattress. There was no sheets or anything. She could tell she was fairly seriously injured. She had a distended abdomen. She had an obvious fracture of her humerus, which wasn't splinted. And she was very lethargic. And so then I went over to the other station wagon where Dennis was, and there was a guy in there that was unconscious, unresponsive, and he had some critical burns all along, his back and abdomen, chest. I can tell it was probably not going to make it.
Oof.
So I went back to the female, the young lady, and I, started to talk to her, and she says, "Oh, you're American?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "You've got to stay with me. Don't let us be alone. You got to stay with us. They're trying to kill us." And I said, "No, she's probably hallucinating or something." So I said, okay, we'll stay with you. So when Dennis came back, he said, "Hey, listen, this guy's going to fly him over to Guaymas, which is a fairly large city."
Yeah.
Large town, but it's got a hospital there, and he's flying them to the hospital. So he says, you guys want to go and make sure they're taken care of. And he says to me, he says, why don't you go and Danny will go because Danny speaks Spanish. And I'm thinking, well, you know, this is what I do for a living. You know, this is what I do. So I said, yeah, I guess I'll, you know, might be fun to fly over there and see what's going on. So as we got in the airplane, they put both the couple, I guess I can say their name. Their last name was Southfield. Her name was Mildred. I got to know Mildred, you know, because I was sitting with her and we talked. Mildred gave me this bag that she had, and it was kind of it was not like a purse or anything, but it had this rope handle on it that, you know what a purse stitch is, you know, where one goes this way, and when you pull it this way, it tightens it up. Okay. And so she says, make sure my family gets this. And I said, well, I don't even know who your family is. Well, inside the purse, she says, is an address book, and there's cash. You use as much cash as you want. But, you know, you got to get a hold of the family. And so we landed in Guaymas. We were met there by 2 ambulances from the local hospital. Mr. Southfield went with Danny in the front ambulance. I went with Mildred in the back ambulance. And we're going red light and siren through this town. And when somebody wouldn't get out of the way, they would tap the bumpers. They would, you know, hit them to force cars off the road. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm gonna freaking die here, and nobody knows I'm here, you know. But it was. I mean, the ambulances weren't stocked. They had drawers and stuff, but there was nothing in them. They had what they said was the oxygen bottle, but it was painted gray. And I thought a gray high pressure bottle, you know, oxygen is orange. I thought gray was nitrogen or something. It was a different, and it only had a black rubber hose that went to a valve. And if the patient was going to get oxygen, they had to put this rubber hose in their mouth, and then they'd turn the oxygen on and they'd breathe air through this black rubber hose. I mean, it was bizarre. It was crazy. And the windshield of the ambulance that I was in had a big diagonal crack right through the front of the windshield. I mean, it was really scary, but we made it to the hospital. They brought Mr. and Mrs. Southfield into these 2 different treatment rooms, and they immediately started injecting Mr. Southfield with Tauan, because you're not allowed to have opiates in Mexico, from what I understand, and Tauan is a synthetic opiate, if I remember correctly, because we used to carry it on our rigs. And but they weren't titrating it to it. They were bolusing, you know, cc after cc after cc, and if they put in 5 cc's of Tauan, then they'd start trying to debride his wounds, and he would writhe in pain, and then they would inject him with more Tauan. And I'm screaming at him. I said, "You're giving him too much. You're going to overdose him." And the guy that was dressed like a doctor, that was kind of taking charge of treatment, forced me out of the treatment room.
Oh,
so then I went to the next treatment room, and Mrs. Southfield was there, and she wasn't getting much of any treatment whatsoever, because I think all the staff were working on Mr. Southfield. Mrs. Southfield had a nurse there and stuff, and I can see her abdomen is getting more distended than what was in the airplane, in the ambulance. And I said that, you know, she needs an IV. And I'm telling him, start an IV. And she was looking at me like she didn't understand. And it was it was heart wrenching to see what was going on. Finally, somebody came in a suit and said that we have to leave. And I said, look, she needs an IV. You're overdosing, mister. If he's not dead already, he will be because you've overdosed. But this lady has a chance here. She needs an IV. She needs fluid replacement. She needs blood. And they said, if you want her to have an IV, you have to go to the pharmacy down the street and buy an IV bag and bring it back here, and we'll start the IV. And
Oh my God.
I was totally out of my element here. I had not a clue. So we ran down to this pharmacy and told them, and the guy spoke broken English, that we needed an IV bag of I think I had asked for normal saline, but we used to use lactated ringers or plasminate or any of that. And he said he didn't have any. So what do you mean you don't have any? And he said, no, don't have any. So I went back to the hospital and told them that the pharmacy didn't have any. Can you have any here? And they said, out or you'll be arrested. So we left the hospital. That's when our little adventure started.
We haven't even gotten into the start of the adventure. Oh, that's fun.
Oh no, this it gets better. You can't make this up. So anyway, Danny and I, he says it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon now. Dennis is going to be coming over to pick us up. You know, we don't have cell phones then or anything like that. Everything was, we use pay phones because this is back in the late 70s. And so we figured we'd try and make our way back to the airport and wait for Dennis to show up. And we got a taxi, and as they took us back to the airport, we noticed that the airport was closed and that there were military had taken over the airport. So no private aircraft were coming in and out of the airport. So we had the guy take us back to town. In order to get a telephone, they have little shops that have telephones, like a bank of telephones, and they're like pay phones. And so we got on the telephone. We called the hotel where Dennis was at, got a hold of him, and he says they do not allow private aircraft to fly after dusk in Mexico. So we'll have to wait until tomorrow morning and they'll come pick us up. And I said, wasn't real thrilled with that, but we'll make do. So I told Danny, I said, we need to make some phone calls to the States and see if we can get a hold of the family of this couple here. And so I opened up her purse thing, the bag that she had. And sure enough, there was a phone book in there, and I looked under the Southfield name. And we called and left messages on their tape, little tape answering machine.
Oh yeah, old school.
Well, old school.
Now.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking we need to get some dinner, but let's go back to the hospital and see what's going on with, Mr. and Mrs. Southfield. So we went back to the hospital. They wouldn't tell us anything. They told us to get out. And we did. So we walked down the street, I remember, and tried to get some dinner, and no restaurant, we went to 3 restaurants, no restaurant would serve us. And they just said, we're closing, or not here or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was really strange because, we had cash and stuff, but they wouldn't serve us. And so we ended up eating off of a little taco vendor. So God knows what we were eating. I was hungry and it worked. And so I said, you know something, I think we, we're out of our depth here. We need to make some calls. And he says, well, let's call the military and see if they can come down and get these Americans out of here. So I said, okay, well, at that time, El Toro Marine Base is just this side of San Diego. Let's call a Marine base and see what they think we should do. So I got the operator and told him to call the El Toro Marine Base and see if we can get through. And so she asked me if I knew the number, and I said, I don't know the number. She says, well, you have to call information and get the number and then call me, and then I can put you through to the number. So we called information. Sure enough, they had a telephone number for the El Toro Marine Base. So we made this call, and this guy answered the phone, and he said he was the OD. Well, I'm thinking, overdose.
Officer of the day.
I'm the officer of the day. What can I do for you? And I explained to him, I'm Mark Siegel. I'm a firefighter paramedic from, LA City Fire. And I'm down here in Guaymas, Mexico, and we have 2 Americans that have been involved in an airplane accident, and they're not being treated well. I think one of them may have already passed. The other one's gonna die if we don't get her out of here and get her some care. Can you guys come down and help us out? And he said, are you kidding me? This has got to be from the Navy. And I said, no, this is real. This is some serious shit we're in here, and we need help. So he says, hang on. And so I was on hold for about 30 seconds, came back, and he said, Mr. Siegel, he says, there was nothing more than we in the Marine Corps would love to do than to come down and invade a sovereign country and get our Americans out of there. But unfortunately, in order to do that, it would be on orders of the president. And I don't think he wants to be awakened at this hour, because we've got a couple of Americans who we think is in the town of Guaymas and we think have been injured. I'm still not convinced. So if you guys can get some more information to us, maybe we can figure out who to call to help you. But I would suggest you call the State Department's representative in Mexico City. So call the consulate. So we did. So we called the consulate, and we got a hold of some guy who was the assistant to the deputy assistant to the secretary of the consular general in Mexico. And sure enough, he says, yeah, we know all about the plane crash. We know about these 2 crazy Americans that are trying to dictate medical care to the hospital. And we've notified the family already. We suggest you lay low because you've made some serious enemies over there. And I said, what are you talking about? All we tried to do was help these people. He says, listen, why don't you guys get to the airport? It's under the control of the military, and you'll be safe there. The family is flying down tomorrow to the airport. You meet them there, and they have instructions on how to get the family out. So I said, yes, sir. So we hung up the phone. We got a taxi, and we told the taxi, we need to go to the airport. He says that airport closed. You can't spend the night there. He said, I'll take you somewhere. So Danny is now talking to him in Spanish to get a clearer understanding of what's going on. And Danny said that he's taken us to his parents' house, and we can spend the night there. So we're weaving in and out of town through these little back roads. I'm thinking, we're dead. We are dead. And it's amazing what you think about it at that moment. So we pull up in front of this house, and there's girls sitting on the porch in negligees. And Danny's talking to him back and forth in Spanish. And it turns out it's doubles as a house of prostitution. And we were going to be able to spend the night there, whether we partook of the local trade or not. That was up to us. But he says, you can, and I said, absolutely freaking no way. So he says, you take us to the airport and we'll figure it out. So we got back in the taxi and he takes us to the airport. And we talked to the guy that looked like he was in charge, had all this gold shit all over his shoulders and stuff. And the guys are around there, they had the biggest guns I've ever seen. Turns out that they were like Browning BARs, Browning automatic rifles,
Okay.
you know, with a tripod on the end, big
Yeah.
old freaking guns. And he said that you can stay here. And he said there's 2 beds and they have jail cells at the airport there, bars and stuff. And he said there's beds in there that you can go. And I said, no, we're not going anywhere where you can close the door and we can't get out. So
Right.
we slept on the benches out there until the next morning. And the next morning, we saw 2 Lear jets come in side by side. It was like the Navy's, you know, Blue Angels and stuff. You know, these 2 Lear jets came in, and there was probably, you know, 100 feet between the jets, and they came in and landed. And 3 people got out. 1 guy got out of one, 2 guys got out of the other one. Turns out that one of them, they were 2 sons, or Mr. and Mrs. Southfield had 2 daughters, and these were the husbands of the 2 daughters. And one of the husbands was a government employee of the state of California. And the other one ran a Porsche restoration business. I happened to have a Porsche at the time, so it's kind of fascinating.
Hey, good conversation.
And,
It's a good
yeah,
icebreaker.
and,
Oh.
So anyway, he said they've been in contact with the State Department. They know everything that's happened. They talked to the owner of the hospital, and they said if you wanted to get your parents out of here, you need to bring a change of clothes for each of them and lots of cash. And so and the third guy was the family surgeon. And so he and I kind of were talking kind of the same language. But anyway, we got a ride to the hospital, and we're waiting in the lobby of the hospital. And they took the owner of the hospital took the 2 sons and the doctor into his private office and left Danny and me in the waiting room. And as we're waiting, 2 guys came in, and they had a Western 6-shooter holster on. They were in civilian cowboy clothes, you know, Western shirt, cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And they came over, they started talking Spanish to Danny. Danny said, after they got through, he says, I have to go with these guys. We're just going outside. And I says, I'm going with you. And they said, no, you have to stay here. I have to go with them. We're just going to be outside talking. And I said, no. And as they started to walk out, I got up to walk out. One of them turned around, pushed me back down on the bench. And then I figured I'd better stay here. Danny talked to him for about 10 minutes and came back in. I said, well, and they said it was nothing. They just kind of wanted an idea why we were here, why we were trying to tell the doctors what to do last night, and just little stuff like this. But Danny had a change of personality. He was more withdrawn. It's kind of strange, which plays in later on.
Okay.
But anyway, the doctor came out and says, we can go back and talk to Mrs. Southfield, but Mr. Southfield had succumbed to his wounds and he's passed. And so as we're walking down the walkway or aisle, hallway, we got to this room at the very end of the hallway, and we walked in and Mrs. Southfield was unconscious. I tried to elicit a stimulus response from her and she didn't respond. And the doctor went over and looked in her eyes, did a little thing. And she was on a EKG monitor, but it was only a monitoring lead. They only had I think they only had 4 leads on her. They didn't have any chest leads or anything. And I noticed the monitor, she was throwing a lot of PVCs. And I figured she was anoxic because they didn't have her on oxygen. And sure enough, I looked up and she went into VFib.
Holy smokes.
So I'm yelling at the nurse. I said, I need a defibrillator. I need a defibrillator. And I pulled the pillow out from underneath her. And I took a metal tray that was on a little stand next to her. And I took the tray off of the stand and I put it under her shoulders and upper chest. And I started doing chest compressions on the bed. And I don't know how effective they were because the bed was still bouncing.
Yeah.
And I'm yelling for a defibrillator, and the nurse came in with a portable X-ray machine.
Oh my God.
And I, the doctor and I didn't, and I said, no, I need a defibrillator. And the doctor, surgeon came over and looked at her and shook his head no. And then the head doctor that was in with the boys came running in and to hear the commotion and said no, everybody had to leave the room. And so we broke the news to the boys that the mother had passed away. And they said that, well, we're going to be leaving here with them this afternoon. I think they had resigned themselves to the fact that it just seemed strange that they weren't more emotionally upset at the hospital. They were just upset that, their mother-in-law passed. And they said, we're flying back today. You guys want to go back with us? And I said, no, but I do have this bag that I'd been carrying around that I wanted to give to them. So I gave it to one of the boys. And I said, we're going to take a ride back to the airport and call Dennis to come get us. And we gave them the number. I gave them my phone number and Danny gave his number. And they said, we wanted to call you when we're going to have the funeral, probably in a week or so. We'd like for you guys to be there. And I said, well, sure. So we went back to the hotel. The rest of the trip was uneventful. We did some fishing, we did, a little diving and stuff. It was really
with a good reminiscent story throughout the entire vacation.
Yeah. And so this is where it really gets good. So we fly back home. And I decided that, I'm going to go to the funeral. It was about 2 days after we got back. And so I was going to go to the funeral with who was then my wife at the time. I met the family and, it was a very nice service. And after the service was over, one of the boys came up with his wife, who was the daughter, and says, can you come into the library? We have a story to tell you. And I said, well, sure. So I went into the library. The wife was there with me. And they said, we have something to tell you. And I said, well, yeah, let's go ahead. Said, well, I said, Mr. and Mrs. Southfield owned a business. Mr. Southfield was an insurance broker. And Mr. Southfield would write short-term, high, yield insurance policies for VIPs that would go on these junkets in case they didn't come back. And I don't know if you remember, if you traveled back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even before. Omaha insurance company used to have little kiosks where you can buy an insurance policy for the duration of your trip. And it was like, $20 or $10 or whatever it was. And you get a, $10,000 life insurance policy that was good for the 7 days, whatever it was, you were on the trip. Well, he made a business out of writing these policies for movie stars and politicians and corporate executives. And these were policies that were $10 million, and $8 million.
Wow.
And they were double indemnity. And they're very expensive policies. So a $10 million policy might cost you $20,000. And if you were killed in an accident, it was double indemnity. So it would pay twice that amount. And I said, well, so far I'm not hearing anything that, is illegal. And he says, well, he was a broker, so he could write policies on many different insurance companies. And if one of his clients didn't come back, the insurance company would do an investigation and find out if it was any hanky-panky with whatever it was. And then they would pay the policy off. Well, the word got out that he would write these policies, and what would happen was, for say, and I'm just throwing some numbers out, it's been a while. So say for a $10 million policy, he would charge, $10,000
Okay.
for a 7-day policy. And it would become effective when he would sign the policy, but then it has to be submitted to the insurance company to go through underwriting and stuff like that. But the policy would be in effect when he would write as the broker of the policy. Well, what would happen is if the people went on these junkets and then came back, he would refund them a percentage, say 50% of the premium, and he would pocket the rest and tear up the policy so nobody knew anything about it. And so he could you understand how this works.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So one day, two people came into his office, two gentlemen, and they said they were representing a judge in the judicial districts in somewhere in Mexico. And this judge was going to go on a trip and he wanted one of these policies. Hey, no problem. So he wrote one of these huge policies for whatever it was. And they said that if the judge comes back and everything's fine, we'll give you half of the premium back and we'll just tear this up. And they said, no worries. And so they wrote this policy. And he got word several days later that this judge had an accident and died. So he submitted the policy to the insurance company. The underwriters got it, and they did their investigation, and they paid the beneficiary of the policy. And then a period of time would lapse, a month or two, and two guys would come in and they'd do the same thing. They wanted a policy written on a politician for a government in one of the states in Mexico. And so he wrote the policy, with the same caveat that it came back that he would refund half the policy. And sure enough, this politician, he didn't come back. And the insurance company paid the premium to the beneficiary after their investigation. some period of time passed, and two different guys came in, said that they wanted to write a policy for some big executive of a business in Mexico. And he said, no, he ain't doing this anymore. And they said, well, no, we really want you to write the policy. We'll pay you double the premium. No, no, he's not in the business of doing that anymore, he said. So one thing led to another, and they said, maybe you should come down to Mexico and meet our client so that you'll understand that everything is on the up and up. And he didn't think twice, and he and his wife Mildred flew down in a private jet to a little town called Mulegé at this very exclusive hotel with a private airstrip. And they had their meeting with these people, and he refused to write the policy. He says, I just refused. This is a family telling me this story. And so the next morning, they're flying home. So they load up this Lear jet that flew down in. And as it took off, it got over the end of the runway and got over where this gully was, and the plane exploded. And as the plane exploded, the pilot, the co-pilot in the front were killed instantly. Apparently, Mr. and Mrs. Southfield, according to their investigator, they were flown or blown free of the wreckage because the explosive, they think, was placed in the nose section of the aircraft where they store some luggage in the front of the aircraft. And when it blew that portion off, and the Southfields were blown clear of the aircraft, and that's where they were rescued. They were blown into some flames and stuff, but they were rescued by the people at the hotel. And so they said that the people that allegedly, let me put this in there.
Yep.
Allegedly, the people that were behind this, representing the judge and the politician, the businessman, were part of his Mexican gang, La M, the family. And they said that the money would be paid to a beneficiary, and that beneficiary was part of La M, and the money would end up getting to the gang where it would be laundered and do whatever. So they said that there's two things that I need to be made aware of. That the La M knows about me and Danny, that we had accompanied the family, Mr. and Mrs. Southfield, and that they did not, La M did not want the story to get out that they were assassinating, allegedly, these politicians, judges, executives for the insurance money. And they said, we don't think you're in any danger, but I would not go back to Mexico ever. And, so I'm feeling a little, self-conscious here. And I'm thinking, what the hell did I get into? I just wanted to help a couple of people. And so I said, all right. And they said, well, now the other thing is that my parents would never have gone on this trip without a large insurance policy being placed on their lives. And we can't find any record of it. Did you guys happen to see a briefcase or any legal papers or anything? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I had opened up a briefcase for just a second before we got buzzed, and I closed it down. But I remember seeing what I think was, papers in there, but I don't know what I saw. So this lady introduced herself as their lawyer and said, "Mr. Siegel, would you be willing to come back here tomorrow? And we would like to hypnotize you and regress you back to the accident site." And the other person that was at the accident site, my partner who wasn't there for the funeral, we'd like for him to be here too. And I said, "Well, I'll put the word out, but yeah, I'll come back down. I've never been hypnotized before. It might be interesting." So the next day, Danny.
Mark, this is crazy.
Oh, it gets better. The next day, Dennis and I and my wife, we go down to their house again. And in the house, there's the lawyer, the family, and this guy who introduced himself as a psychiatrist, and he's an expert at hypnosis. And he says that he wanted to hypnotize us and we'll regress you back to the scene. So I said, okay. So Dennis went first, and the guy had this little pendant, and he said, "Concentrate on this pendant and just listen to my voice." And he instructed everybody to be absolutely quiet. So that he's looking at this little pendant, and the guy's talking and relax and listen to my voice and all this kind of stuff. And Dennis, boom, he went out like that. And he regressed him back. And he saw that in the logbook of the plane that he looked at, he remembered who it was registered to, the airport that it flew out of, and the names of the pilot and the co-pilot. And that's all that he could come up with. So they wake him up and he says, "Okay, Mark, it's your turn." I said, "Okay." So, I mean, they go, wife's there and all these people there. So he says, and he's wiggling this little pendant around in front of me. And I'm listening to his voice and nothing's happening. And he's, I said, "Hey, Doc, I'm still here. Ain't nothing happening here." And he said, "Well, there's really two types of people that really can't get hypnotized. And those are people with a very, very low IQ, less than, say, 60, or pathological liars. I don't think you're either one of those." And my wife at the time says, "Well, I don't know about that." So he says, "Let me try one more thing." So he went out to his car and he brought back this pinwheel, big white disc with a black little pinwheel that, it's down. And you know what? It reminded me, if you ever look at the jet engine of a commercial aircraft.
Yeah. The little spire. Yeah.
Pinwheel. Okay. It's exactly what it reminded me of. Okay. Except it was white with a black line instead of black. And I think the white line that the jets have. So he cleared the room. So he says, "Okay, Mark," he says, "I want you to look at this pinwheel as it spins. I don't want you to think of anything else. I'm not going to say anything. And when you see a yellow haze around the pinwheel, raise your finger." I said, "Oh, yeah, here we go." So I'm thinking, "Mark, you better go out on this one, because failure is not an option here." So anyway, so I said, "Okay." So I'm like this, and I'm looking at this pinwheel spinning around, and nothing's happening. And I'm spinning around and spinning around. Then all of a sudden, I see this little yellow haze around the pinwheel. So I remember him saying, "Hey, put your finger up." So I put my finger up. And the next thing I hear is a wham, wake up. I says, "I don't know about you. I never went to sleep. What are you talking about?" He said, "You've been out for about the last 15 minutes. And he says, let me tell you what we heard." He says, he described the briefcase, which was his, or the Mr. Southfield's briefcase. And you described it to a T, you know, the buckles, the handle. And when you opened it up, that top sheet that you looked at, that you didn't realize you looked at, was the cover sheet for this insurance policy that was written on him. And I described the border around the policy that was little circles around it. And it looked like, I just said that it looked like a rosary. And it was around there. I described the company name, the address of the company, and the phone number of the company, but it didn't have the amount of the insurance that was on there that was on other. This was the cover page, and that's really all I saw. So with that information, they were able to, you know, run down this multi-million-dollar policy that he had taken out for them on this trip. So they said, "Mark," they said, "I have to agree with the family that, you know, you really shouldn't go back to Mexico ever again." I said, "Well, I don't plan to. That's fine." When I got home from there, I have a very good friend of mine that was a homicide detective for LAPD and worked robbery homicide. So he was downtown. And so I told him the story. And he said, "They tell me that to never go to Mexico again. Am I in any danger?" Well, LAPD had at the time, under Daryl Gates, criminal conspiracy unit. And I think it's probably a version of that still is active. And in this criminal conspiracy unit, they have people in different organizations, either undercover or snitches or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So they have people that are part of different drug cartels, if you will, or in the periphery, but they can tell what's going on. And they said that, yeah, I've heard the name of Mark Siegel, but if he's in the United States, yeah, they're not going to come near me. Too many people know about me. Too many people know about what's happened, and they don't want the full, as if I was someone. They don't want the full power of the American government to come down on them because they took out an American citizen. So, and this is, back in the 70s. So maybe they thought they had more power than or influence than they really did. But to this day, I've been to Mexico probably twice. And the first time I went back was probably 25 years after this particular incident. And it was on a cruise. And I didn't want to get off the boat, one of these booze cruises that go from LA to Ensenada and back, I didn't, and I went, and I didn't want to get off the boat. But the wife wanted to go shopping. And I said, "Well, you go by yourself. I don't get it." And so that didn't go over well. So I did get off the boat. But I was very nervous walking around, and it'd been 25 years. So if the guys that did this were still around, but the fascinating, the sad ending to this whole thing is Danny, who went across the bay with me. He was the one that was interviewed by the two guys in the Western outfit.
Yeah.
Well, we got at the fire station whenever there's somebody that's retired or so, and especially active, but somebody most time retired. If there's a death, we get 10 bells and a teletype prints out with the name and appointment date, retirement date, and all that kind of stuff. So I was at the fire station. This was probably a month after I got home from this trip. And 10 bells came across. So the rookie, his responsibility is when you hit 10 bells, you answer it, and then you read the teletype over the PA system. And 10 bells came in, and he rings the ding to indicate that he get the answer back, and he read that Danny, my buddy that went over there, died, and he got 10 bells, and he died in Oklahoma. And I said, well, what the hell? I didn't understand it. Well, the story goes, and I haven't been able in all these years to even find an entry on the internet. But the story we got is that he got a phone call at the station, and it was from his wife saying she was leaving him. Now, the two were in love and huggy kissy at the airport. We thought they needed to get a room, but we finally separated them. He got on, and he called her almost daily after we got back from Guaymas to the hotel. And it was a shock to hear that she was leaving him. She was taking their son and going to her parents in Oklahoma City. And apparently the story is that he took her and the son hostage in a furniture store in Oklahoma City and was shot and killed by a police sniper. Now, I looked it up. I found no news entry, no nothing, but that's the story that the fire department got from the family. And he's dead. Danny, the guy went over, and that's all I know. So everybody's been telling me to write a book about this. It's very Hitchcock-esque about it. And so I outlined it. I've probably written over the last couple of years, I probably have 3/4 of the narrative written. And I think the last time I looked at it, it was like at 40 or 50 typewritten pages. And I'm just debating whether to publish it if and when I ever finish it. Because sure enough, I'm going to go on a cruise ship back to Mexico, and I'm going to walk along the street, and somebody's going to come up and put a gun in my back. It's, oh, Mr. Siegel, we've been waiting 40 years for you to come back into our town. And so I'm very hesitant to.
Oh, Mark, there's some things I might have to jump on board with and say, maybe Mexico's not your destination.
I don't know. We should talk about it. If I had a ghostwriter, but I thought about it. I thought I'd change it to be a gang of Serbians or something like that. But it's a absolutely true story. Absolutely.
Wow.
True story.
What the?
It's really amazing. It's really amazing. So.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm just waiting. I knew I'd get taken out at some point. I'm surprised I've been around this long, but Emmett said from LAPD says that they're not going to touch you here in the United States. So don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Man, my dad tells me that all the time.
Yeah, don't sweat the small stuff. So anyway.
Jeez, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. is that the hill you want to die on? 'Cause it's just oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, we really didn't get into too many other stories. And
Right, let's keep this going because
Oh,
I
let's
am
go.
I am loving every bit of this. Now I know it's a little bit
Yeah.
late for you, so I'll leave it entirely up to you. But I said from the stuff that we've talked about, you were there when Rodney King happened and all the riots were
Yeah,
going
well,
on.
this is a really interesting story. And it's true. You know, I'm at home and I got a phone call that I'm getting recalled into work, and that I'm to report to the command post. That I think the command post was at a RTD or you know, a bus, what they call it. It's now the Metro, but it was the RTD station, 54th and Arlington. Now this bus depot is where all the buses in this district, they all come to get service and stuff. So it's huge. It's like 4 square blocks, and it's surrounded by a 10-foot high block wall all the way around it. So it's a highly secure place. And when the riots broke out, LAPD decided that that's where the command post for the riots are going to be. Normally, LAPD's command post is on site because they like to have eyes on, you know. But so anyway, so I you know, it's middle of the afternoon, so I get dressed and I start flying down the freeway going to downtown to and I called in and said, listen, there's heavy traffic. I'm in a civilian vehicle, so I need an escort to get to 54th and Arlington. And they said, you'll pick up your escort at the freeway exit at Normandy. So get to there and they'll escort you in. So I made it through the freeway to Normandy and the off ramp to Normandy. And there's 4 CHP officers, or 4 CHP units, and each unit had 4 officers in it.
Holy
And
smoke.
they said, just pull in the middle of us. I had 2 officers, 2 units in front, 2 units in back. And we're going red light and siren, except for my car, you know, I'm in a civilian car. And they escort me to 54th and Arlington. And so I got my relief, told me what was going on. I was to be in charge of EMS dispatching, that calls would come in to our dispatch center, and anything that's related to into the tactical area, which was, you know, defined instead of our dispatch center, which at the time was called Operations Control Division, or OCD, that the people at OCD would send it to me. I would write up a slip, or I would have somebody write up a slip if they took the call, and then they would hand it to me, and I would prioritize what gets dispatched and what wouldn't get dispatched. So I had all my ambulances, probably 10 or 15, in the command post area, and CHP was assigned fire escort. So any fire dispatch, the fire side would dispatch it, and they would send usually a modified dispatch. So you get a lot less resources on a structure fire than you would have during normal times. So we didn't have the resources. So you could get a commercial fire, you may send an engine instead of, you know, LA City would send, you know, 50, 60 firemen or firefighters to a first alarm at a large commercial, where here you would get an engine company with 4 guys, and they would be escorted by units from the highway patrol. And you would look out over the wall, you can see over the wall, and there would be these huge columns of smoke all over the area. It looked like a war zone. building after building was on fire, and you couldn't stay there long enough to put them out because guys were getting, snipers were shooting at our firefighters and paramedics as they were going on calls. There was a report of a rescue that went down a street. It turned out to be a dead end. And as they got toward the end of the street, people had rolled trash cans and stuff out in the street in an attempt to block them in. And they had to shoot, the police had to shoot their way out of there to get out of there.
Holy
Well,
smoke.
people were, civilians were getting shot and killed as looters, or if they were taking shots at the police. And the bodies would be brought back to the command post, and they would almost be piled in a corner like cordwood, because the coroner couldn't get there to take the bodies until everything had settled down. But I was there for about 40 hours, and there was 10 minutes sleep, 20 minutes sleep, where you get somebody to cover for you. But it was as scary as, it was like, I've never been in a war zone, but that's exactly, we had police officers that would be in tactical positions high up so they can see over the wall, because there were rumors that people were going to be throwing Molotov cocktails or hand grenades or IEDs over the wall to where the command post was.
Wow.
And so we were constantly on a state of readiness. I mean, for 40 hours, I was in full tactical gear, just in case somebody threw an explosive over.
For 40 hours.
But on the brighter side of things, some guy came over to me and we were doing we were busy. Some guy came over to me, he says, I'm from a large pizza chain. Says, I have 100 pepperoni pizzas for you.
What? Oh, wow.
Exactly. I said, what? I said, yeah, I have 100 pepperoni pizzas for you. Where would you like me to put them? And I'm thinking, oh, it's somebody's freaking joke or something. So I said, I'm kind of hungry. Put them right here. And so I'm back over here. I'm taking calls.
I'm kind of hungry.
And then I turn around, and there is like 4 stacks of pizzas that are probably 6 feet high. And there's 4, and I, God, something smells really good around here. Word got out in the command post that there was Siegel's got 100 pepperoni pizzas over at the EMS side. And I'd say within 2 minutes, there was crumbs. I think I had 1 frickin' slice. But
oh my God.
yeah, so it was crazy. It was scary crazy. But we're getting toward the end. I should probably, I don't know, what else did you want to talk about?
So there might be something about you being on General Hospital as well.
Oh no, it was I was on a TV show called Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Santa Barbara was a soap opera. And a very good friend of mine was the technical advisor for the show. And they were shooting one day and he couldn't make it to the set. So he calls me and says, hey, can you go to NBC or wherever it was and sit in for me as a technical advisor? And I said, well, yeah, sure. So I get there and introduce myself to the producer and Dr. Hensel already called ahead and cleared it for me. So I said, I'm sitting in for Bruce, and they said, okay, we're just going to run through, I forget what they call it, where all the lights are going to be and the people are going to be. And it's like a rehearsal, but so the scene is a lady, one of the stars is in a hospital. So they had a whole hospital room set up. It was really nice. And she's in bed. She's got this terminal head injury or some sort of head injury thing going on. And she is shacked up with the doctor who's treating her. And her ex-husband or brother, I forget what it was, is in the room. And so she goes into cardiac arrest. And the brother, the boyfriend, and the doctor who she's shacked up with get into a disagreement because somebody should be helping her, nobody's helping her. So the doctor tries to push the brother out of the room. In the meantime, nobody's doing shit for the patient. So I said, hey, stop. I said, if you want this thing to go down so it's semi-believable, this is how it goes down. So I said, you have to have somebody hit a code blue, has to be announced.
Yep.
And if the brother is panicking and the doctor wants to push him out, you got to have people coming in to take care of the patient. And then you can put the camera on the brother and the doctor and how they're going to interact. But in the meantime, you got to have a doctor, you got to have a couple of nurses come in. Somebody's got to do CPR, somebody's got to do. So they said, okay, get Siegel into wardrobe. I want him in scrubs and get a stethoscope around his neck. And I said, no. I said, I'm not an actor. So he said, you don't have to act, just act natural. And so we had this scene that actually made the show. And the scene was, she goes into cardiac arrest. The brother and the doctor are arguing with each other as to who caused this. In the meantime, there was a code blue call. I come running in, and the nurses come running in. And in order to have a crash cart, they put a Sears toolkit on top of a TV tray. And one of the nurses came running in with that. And so the scene was shot, and we can't say anything, because if you say anything, they have to pay you more because you had lines. Otherwise, you're just an extra. So I told him, I said, look, the scene's probably 15 or 20 seconds. Nobody's saying anything here that's not realistic. So they said, well, what would you want to say? Because it has to be less than 5 lines. Because if you're an under 5 player, you get paid this much. If you're an over 5 player, you're paid this much. And if you're over so many other lines, you're considered a principal, you get paid a lot more. So they said, we'll make something up, but it can only be 1 or 2 sentences. So we go to shoot the thing, and she goes into cardiac arrest. The nurse comes in with this tool chest on a TV tray. And I said, somebody call X-ray and get lab down here. And then I hear cut, print, and we're out. So I made it, I can say I played a doctor on TV.
You a doctor? No, but I played one on TV.
Craziest, stupidest thing I'd ever done in my entire life. I just hope nobody ever saw it. But it was a TV show called Santa Barbara.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's one of my more embarrassing moments.
Are you kidding me? That's fantastic. I went from paramedic to doctor, back to paramedic, all in the same day.
Yeah, it's funny because I got paid I don't know what I got paid for that thing, maybe $200 or something like that. And about a year later, I get a check in the mail from, it was a company, I think it was called Cowboy Enterprises or something, for $2.70 because it was a residual from a rerun of the same show. So I said, I don't know if I even cashed either of those checks. But,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, that was it.
That's awesome. You know, one of the other things you and I talked about is you actually worked for a short time in air ambulance as well. And
Yeah.
you have a pretty good story from that too.
Yes, we were doing runs. I was on the job, and I actually had two jobs where we were using aircraft. One was I was flying for the American Powerboat Racing Association as a jump medic. So these
that's
guys
cool.
were racing these huge boats out in the ocean. Every once in a while, somebody would stuff it. They'd get thrown or get trapped, and we'd have medics in a helicopter that would jump out and try and extricate the drivers or throttlemen from the boat. But we also had boats placed around the race course, and they would actually help out quite a bit. So I did that for a couple of years until I realized that how stupid are you to jump out of a frickin' helicopter in the middle of the ocean with boats going 100 miles an hour past you.
Sorry, it's what I do for a living.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, hey, it was fun for the first couple of times. But after that, we recruited some guys that were younger and not as well developed between the years.
What are you saying, Mark? What are you saying about me? I mean,
I love you guys.
Hey, thank you.
I love you guys. I miss it, but doing it, on a professional organization like you guys are doing, whether it's P1 or whomever, it's a little bit different than you get a bunch of guys that spend millions of dollars on power boats to go out and do 100 miles an hour out in the ocean. And they say, well, we better have somebody that can jump in the ocean from a helicopter just in case one of us gets stuck or,
Yeah.
But anyway, but I did get recruited for a regular commercial air ambulance business. And we would fly Citations or Lear 35s on these ambulance runs. And we would go from, say, out of LAX or Van Nuys Airport to, I did one to Casper, Wyoming. I did, most all over, California and the United States to bring back. And most of them were contract with Kaiser Hospital. The Kaiser Hospital felt it's better for them to bring their patient back to one of their facilities than to have them treated in a remote location. Don't know what the politics is behind it, but it made fun for us because we were able to go out and go to all these different places and see things. But they called me one night and said, how soon can you get ready to go to Venice, Italy? And I said, wow, I didn't normally do international things, but I said, well, I got my passport and all that stuff. I got all my equipment. I says, I can be ready to go by, tomorrow. He says, okay, be at Van Nuys to pick up where our office was, pick up all the equipment that's going over. And they buy 4 seats on the aircraft, commercial. We flew Lufthansa. They buy 4 seats, 2 for the equipment and 1 for me and 1 for a nurse.
Wow.
And so we get to LAX and we go from LAX to Dusseldorf to Milan and eventually got to Venice. And we went to the hospital in Venice and met the patient. And this lady was on a cruise ship and fell down some stairs and broke her hip.
Okay.
And we are going to fly her back on a commercial airliner to the United States in a couple of days. So as I'm walking, doing my visits in the hospital to see her, I'm walking down the hallways and I hear I'm talking with one of the nurses, and a lady says, I hear American, I hear English. And so I stuck my head in the room, and here's this lady in this hospital bed that she was a tourist in Venice and had some sort of pulmonary issue, and she can't get anybody to get her out of the hospital and back home. And so I did a little history and physical and called our dispatchers, and they sent another team over to pick her up, because we couldn't take both patients, because when we're flying a non-ambulatory patient back, the gurney sits on top of 6 seats.
Oh my gosh.
And then we take the 3 seats across the aisle. And then there's a drape that goes around it. So the nurse and I are doing an assessment while we're flying back. 2 things really stand out about that incident. Number one, the nurses in the hospital in Venice, they were wearing these long flowing dresses with the pillbox hats. It looked like pictures that you see from the 30s, the way the nurses were dressed. It was shocking. They had bedpans and urinals in the rooms that were chrome or stainless steel. Nothing was disposable.
Wow.
It was amazing how, I don't know. It just seemed like it took a step back in time.
Old school.
On the flight.
Stuff still works.
Yeah.
Why not keep using it?
It really old school. On the flight back, the flight or the I think it was a flight attendant announced over the PA for one of us, my partner, my nurse and I, to come up to the cockpit. And I'm thinking, boy, this isn't good. And so the nurse wasn't going to leave the patient. So I went up, and she said, we have a gentleman in first class that is experiencing very severe ear pain. Is there anything that you could do? So I said, well, let me take a look at him and I'll see. So he had a reverse block. In scuba diving, we call it a reverse block, where he couldn't clear his ear from pressure. And it got worse after takeoff as the pressure decreased. And I think the ambient pressure inside an aircraft is about 8,000 feet. I think, I'm not sure.
Not sure either.
The pilot comes out and he said, the people that they've contacted said that they were approved to make an emergency landing, except that we're flying over the ocean. There isn't any emergency landing, so we can
You're over the middle of the Atlantic.
Head back. Yeah, we can turn around and head back or try and continue on. So he asked me, says, is there anything we can do here? And I said that, see if you can get any lower so that you can increase the air pressure in the airplane. And he says, you have no idea what kind of hoops we'd have to jump through to leave our 38,000 feet to get down so that they can increase the air pressure inside the cabin. But that's eventually what they did. They dropped down, and as they dropped down and the pressure increased, his ears, popped, equalized, and he was fine. So they continued the flight. We went to came back directly into LAX and took the lady that we were transporting to the hospital. About 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, a gift comes in the mail from Lufthansa. And I'm saying, oh, yeah, baby, I'm getting free lifetime travel on Lufthansa, right? I'm saying, I cut a fat hog.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, business class.
Yeah. I'd say even one round trip. It was a wallet. They sent me a freaking wallet, nothing in it. That was, and the next time I flew, I looked at in the commercial, I don't think they have the magazine anymore, but they used to have the magazine that lists all the junk you can buy.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I found the wallet in this thing. It was $4.50 for this wallet. And
that's hilarious.
I probably saved the airline tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, by hopefully clearing this guy's ear. But they send me a $5 wallet.
Hey,
but,
thanks.
it's just that's what makes this job so much fun, man.
Oh my goodness.
I had a cardiac arrest. How did this go down? The mother of this guy, and this guy was like 40, living with his mom, and she heard a thump in the bathroom, went upstairs, and this guy's unconscious on the floor of the bathroom. Calls us, we get there, and sure enough, we pull him out, and he was in V-fib when we pulled him out, not breathing. So we worked him up, converted him, and got him to where he had a ROSC, and we transported him to the hospital, and he actually survived. And then a few weeks later, I won't mention the restaurant, that this guy was in charge of public relations, executive vice president of public relations for this restaurant chain, high-end restaurant chain. And he sent me a complimentary dinner for one at this restaurant.
Couldn't bring your wife?
Oh yeah, it cost me a fortune to bring Robin to the meal.
But Robin, you're welcome.
I love it. Hey, it's just that's what makes life. That's what makes it so much fun.
Oh, totally.
I'll tell you, like I said, I never worked a day. And I'd been yelled at by family members that didn't know better. I'd been yelled at by hospital staff and nurses that should have known better. And the key is I never took it personally. I always felt it was business. It was not personal. And it just never really, really affected me. And I loved every minute of it. If I could, I would have done it all over again. Now, you and Jason are kind of living it. Jason's the crew chief on the helicopter, but
yeah.
And the legacy continues.
Yeah. So I know there are so many stories that you have that you could share, and I actually
haven't even
words of wisdom. For everybody out there that's even thinking about EMS or fire department or anything, what would you tell them right now?
You can't look at it as a job. It's got to be a calling. If you're looking at it to come in and get a paycheck, and only, fire department, we only work 10 days a month, at least on LA City. But they're 10, 24-hour shifts, which comes out to 56 hours a week. You can't look at it as a job. It's a calling. You've got to want to do this.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, you're not going to get a thank you. You're not going to.
Isn't that the truth?
It's got to, your thank you's got to come from inside.
Yeah.
You've got to be there for your patient. the joy that you get out of it is the satisfaction of seeing your patient get better. You know, you'll get called to the home of I think I said this earlier, of a lady whose child has a fever, and she's looking at you saying, help my child, help me. And there's nobody else she's looking for. And you have to walk a really fine line of not getting so emotionally involved that you lose focus, but you have to be emotionally involved to look at this as a person and not as a case. This isn't a number. This is a person that has a name. You treat everybody, I used to tell the guys on the job, you treat everybody like their family. They're your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter. You know, I had a crib death I responded on early on in my career. And it looked exactly, this child looked, it was a little girl, looked exactly like my daughter. Daughter's Hispanic background. This was an Hispanic family, the dark hair, the dark eyes, and this baby's laying in this crib, and it's an obvious crib death. I looked at it, I looked down, I saw Stephanie, and I lost it.
Oh, man.
So I had to go next door. Called the wife. Said, I need to hear Stephanie cry. And she said, what are you talking about? I just got her down. I said, I need to hear Stephanie cry. She must have heard something in my voice. So she put Stephanie next to the phone, got her to cry. And then I was fine. It got back to reality. But, you know, that's one of the reasons why I would never work in a city in where I live, because it's happened in LA City where the guys go out and it's a family member. I just didn't want that to happen, although I feel very confident that I can, you know, treat, and I have treated my family from little partial airway obstruction to wounds and cuts and broken bones and stuff like that. But there, you know, kids get to you, and you've got to be able to control your emotion. But, you know, I tell everybody, treat everybody like they're either a juror or a voter, because either way you want them on your side. You know,
that's pretty
tell
good.
all my guys, you know,
I like that one too.
Keep the rubber side down. You know, you don't want the red lights on the ground and the tires in the air. So be in control. You know, I got all kinds of little one-liners. You know, my dad used to tell me, Mark, when I speak, you think of it as coming from the burning bush. Well, I told that to a few guys before I retired. They didn't know what the burning bush was.
Oh, that's terrible.
Maybe it's time for me to leave.
Get right out of Exodus. Jeez.
Yeah. So, you know, it is what it is. And, but I think the key is, you know, that you just can't look at this as a job. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids that are on the job nowadays, it's a job. I come in, I do my work, and then I come home. That's it. No more, no less.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I come home, if I see something on the freeway, I'm always looking. When I see a CHP off, this goes back to my days on the police department, but when I see a CHP officer pulling somebody over for a traffic violation on the freeway, I'm looking, is he okay? You know, one thing my partner used to always do when I was a boot is we'd be driving along and he'd say, stop, where are we? And I don't know what street we're on. I didn't pay attention. I didn't know what intersection we were at. We get shot. You need to call for help. you have no idea where we are. Well, now we got automatic vehicle locators and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Right. But back then, you
Back
guys
then,
didn't have that.
that was it.
Right.
That was it. So, I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on. So anyway, call me
Well-
anytime, even if you just want to chit chat. You don't need to do the podcast.
I would love to. Just to, hear the experience and get more from you. I'm all about it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. And
Hope it works for you.
it absolutely will. I promise.
I can see.
See you, buddy. Have a good night. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real Rescue Podcast. Please take a minute to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you on as a guest. Or if you have any questions about rescue or anything else we talk about here, send an email to jason@therealrescue.com. That's Jason at TheRealResq.com. You can also check us out on our web pages, therealrescue.com, our Facebook page, and our Instagram page @TheRealRescue. Again, a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember, when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.